Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our work session of the Las Cruces City Council. Today is Monday, November 8th, 2021, approximately 1 p.m. If you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Okay, we're going to start off with our pet of the week, and we have Jennifer Martinez from our communications office is going to introduce those pets.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Jennifer Martinez with the city's communications office, and today we have a couple of furry friends that would like to find a new home. So I will begin with our cat of the week. Camille is a 1-year-old spayed female. She is a mellow cat and hangs out in the VIC, which I just recently learned means the very important cat cattery room. That means she hangs out, but not in a cage, so that's kind of cool. She melts when you give her chin scratches, and sometimes she gives little love bites on occasion. She does need a home that is mellow like her. Then we have Zorro. This 3-year-old is a large breed. He's been at the shelter for quite a while. He has a little history of picking on little dogs, but is great with dogs his own size. He loves human interaction, and he is polite enough to sit before feeding. You can meet these guys by calling the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley and setting up an appointment. And if you're interested in either of these two cuties, just jot down their animal number, then call the ASCMV at 382-0018 to make an appointment to go visit them. And as you can see for Zorro, his number is 6034, and for Camille, her number is 39040. You can also interact with some of the center's animals at the Downtown Farmers and Crafts Market this weekend from 9 a.m. to noon on Saturday at the Plaza de las Cruces. Thank you so much, Mayor.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, now we're going to have our jobs of the week, and it looks like Dr. Francisco Payadas will present those.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And for today's jobs of the week, we're going to have an art instructor with the City of Las Cruces. This position is going to be open until filled. There's also positions available with electronic caregiver. There's 5 positions for care coordinators. These are going to be closing on the 28th of December. We also have some driver ambulance non-EMT with American Medical Response, and these positions are going to be closing on the 29th of January of 2022. We also have positions available with Frank Supply Company, and these are on the counter, sales, and rentals. These will be closing on the 27th of January 2022. There's also ITS Quest is looking for 8 positions for holiday decorators. These are going to be closing on the 28th of November of this year. For a full list of jobs, internships, and volunteer opportunities, visit www.employeenm.com as well as www.governmentjobs.com/careers/Las Cruces. And the contact information for our friends with New Mexico Workforce Connections are located at 226 South Alameda Boulevard, and their phone number is 524-6250. Additionally, Mr. Mayor, we wanted to let you know that the job fair on November the 4th was a success. There was over 200 attendees and over 60 businesses that registered for it. So it was good success that we had in there. And the webpage is employeenm.com. Thank you very much.
Did you get any police officers signing up?
We had a booth for them as well.
Okay. Good job. Thank you, Dr. Payadas. Okay, before we get started on our 3 items on the agenda, we have Councilor Beta Stuvi, who is supposed to be out of town, and she's at the airport. Her dedication is impeccable. But before we begin, we need a motion and a second to allow her to participate telephonically, please.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilor Flores, second by Mayor Pro Tem Gandara to allow Councilor Tessa Beta Stuvi to participate in today's work session via the telephone. Christine?
This is on the motion to allow Councilor Abeta Stuvi to participate telephonically. Councilor Abeta Stuvi?
Yes.
Councilor Vasquez?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Yes.
Councilor Sorg?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Yes.
Councilor Gandara?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes. Okay, so the first of 3 items is item 3.1, the Las Cruces Police Department update, and I see Chief Dominguez here, and I'll introduce his team.
Good afternoon, everybody. Police Chief Miguel Dominguez for the record. Appreciate the opportunity to provide the Las Cruces Police Department third quarter update. With me today, presenting as well, will be Deputy Chief Brock, Lieutenant Gutierrez, Lieutenant Wiedela, Sergeant Austin, and Lieutenant Bradley. We're going to be covering some personnel. We're going to be covering crime statistics, an update on our internal affairs and community engagement, and we'll be available for questions after the presentation. Without any further ado, we'll go into our personnel. Currently, on paper, we have 172 commissioned officers of a 202 authorized strength. The positions, or the 172, also includes some officers that have been hurt recently and are on extended medical leave. We also have a few officers that are on extended family leave due to childbirth and other reasons. We also have an officer that is actually in basic training for the Navy. So we have some issues where 172 drives us down to about 165 if our current count is correct, but that's about where we have on the street right now. We do have our academy set to start in January of 2022. Sergeant Austin will be going over our recruitment efforts here in a little bit during his portion of the presentation. 14 code enforcement officers and 8 animal control officers. We have a couple of brand new officers in those two sections, but they are at their full strength. We have 6 police service aides that have assisted us greatly in pursuing smaller type crimes, misdemeanors, as well as non-injury crashes. After we last spoke during one of our work sessions, it was suggested that we do increase that our police service aides. So we have hopefully coming up here at the mid-year adjustment an additional 6 officers that are police service aides that we'll be asking for, and 83 diligent civilian staff that assist us greatly in our day-to-day operations. Calls for service this year, we have 103,671 current calls for service. 2020, the entire year of 2020, we had 156. We are currently, it doesn't look like we're going to reach that 168,000 mark. We're currently in trend to reach approximately 145 based off of monthly averages. So year to date, we are at 103,671 calls for service. Incident reports, however, 2020 saw 23,139 actual incident reports taken from those calls for service. Thus far this year, we are at 2,715. We are on track to surpass the 2020 incident report level of 23,139. Our online reports as well continue to increase, and we encourage the citizens to continue to use this way of reporting crimes. We get them immediately to go into our system, and we can at some point assign them a lot faster than waiting a couple of days to report your crime and things of that nature. So there is an online portal through our transparency page that we encourage citizens to please use this online report system. This is our third quarter violent crime update. I will advise you all that we have a 10% they're within 10% of variance of being correct. They're constantly moving up and down. Specifically in violent crime, we get robberies, aggravated assaults reported 2 or 3 weeks sometimes after the actual incident occurred. So we are within the error margin of about 10%. So just keep that in mind when we look at these numbers, is as we report them out to FBI, they do fluctuate a bit. Currently we have, through September, we had 7 criminal homicides. We did have one in October, which leaves us at 8 for the entire year. The good news is that all of these homicides have been cleared out through arrest. Our sexual assaults are down -3% through the year. These are actually year-to-date 2020 January through September numbers as well. So we're comparing apples to apples on this. Our robberies are up significantly, 61%. We'll point out that typically you think robberies and people think of convenience stores and banks being held up. Out of those 58%, only 4 involved in establishment. Many of the rest of those are other types of robberies. We have 26% or 15 of that total that we know through investigations were drug-related. They met up to exchange drugs of some sort, and during that transaction, the victim was robbed of their money. We also have 45% of those where the victim actually knew the suspect, so we believe that there was some sort of personal dispute that was going on at the time, or an affray of that, something of that nature. There were several of these were taken in parking lots, backpacks and purses, things of that nature. And as we get along further into our presentation, Lieutenant Bradley can expound on that. Aggravated assaults, which is the majority of our violent crime rate, is up 21%. Last time we reported out on violent crime, we are at 55% for aggravated assaults. Since May, we saw a downward trajectory month to month. September saw a spike again, but the majority of these, and our large percentage, happened in January, February, and March, where we saw significant increases over 2020. For instance, January had 50 for 2021, and in 2020 we had 30 aggravated assault incidents. And we saw that trend January, February, and March. And then in May, we started trending downwards, with the exception of September that did see a spike. So currently we are at a 21%. Again, these are reported oftentimes later to us, but we are still investigating these, so 430 might actually go down or up given the details from the investigation. Another important statistic in here is that 20% of these aggravated assaults are multi-victim cases, in which case, for example, 5 people got a gun pointed at them during the same incident, and that balloons that number up very quickly because we have to present it out or report it out as 5 individual aggravated assaults, even though it was the same incident. Currently, year to date, we are running at a 22% increase on violent crime. Again, the last time we reported out violent crime in May was a lot higher. So we are hopefully trending down, and hopefully the trend continues. This is our 5-year trend of violent crime. We presented this slide at the last presentation. It shows us moving up from 2019, 2020, and currently we're on pace to exceed that 546 number that was reported out last year. Hopefully not by a lot, but there's a lot of initiatives and programs and projects that we have running that hopefully keep that number down and at least get us to be flat with 2020. And if it is an increase, hopefully it's not a large one. I will point out that 2016 and 2017 seem a little bit low. That was when we were reporting out UCR to FBI, that was Uniform Crime Reporting. In 2018, we started reporting NIBRs, which includes all crimes that occur during the incident. For example, in 2016, 2017, if there was a robbery, a burglary, and an auto theft that occurred during the same incident, we would have only reported the robbery. Since NIBRs took over, we have to report all 3 as an individual incident. So that ballooned these numbers up. All the other agencies throughout the nation are seeing this because it is mandated that everybody go to the NIBR system. Our property crime. Currently, our burglaries are at a deficit, 14% decrease over last year. The large portion of that has to do with commercial, residential burglaries, and non-residential burglaries. A large decrease in each one of those has allowed us to keep these below 2020 level. A lot of it, we know that COVID had a big part in especially commercial burglaries where businesses were closed and weren't getting into their businesses until 2 or 3 days after the actual burglary occurred. We know that these these incidents have gone down significantly because people are coming back to work, but also Deputy Chief Brock and his personnel have done a lot of footwork and put together a lot of projects to help bring these down. Auto burglaries jumps off the page at 25%. These, again, continue to spike, especially when college is in session. We know that 63% of these occurred in apartments and residences. We also have information that we know that there's possibly crews that are working throughout the night, as we'll have 12 or 13 auto burglaries happen on the same street. So we know that there's crews of 4 or 5, often kids that are going through, and we call it popping doors. They just check to see when the vehicles are left open, and crimes of opportunity, getting whatever they can out of there. We do have some felony larcenies as well. This is this 117 really jumps off the page. The large issue there has to do with catalytic converters. Last year through 2020, we had a total of 16 catalytic converters that were stolen last year. This year, we have 128. That's really ballooned our larceny theft number up to give us that 117% increase. We also have a large increase in building supply thefts from work sites. As materials for construction have gone up, so has the need to procure them however they see fit. But we do have some projects going on, especially when they're building a lot of homes, to keep those numbers down. We also saw a significant increase in ATV and UTV thefts, tools and electronics, especially expensive cell phones, which is part of that felony larceny. Our vehicle thefts continue to be an issue for us at a 25% increase over last year, and that last year's number was also an increase over the previous year. We have several projects that we work with our local agencies and federal partners to keep these numbers down. Out of those 382, however, we do have 66% of those, or 278 recovered vehicles that we've been able to recover in the city, in the county, as well as El Paso. And we actually recovered one in Colorado as well. A lot of these had to do with juvenile crime. During the summer months, we had a rash of about 5 or 6 little groups of juveniles that were going around town stealing these vehicles, and that drove our numbers up significantly. So through the year, we were actually flat. We have 2 more incidents of property crime than we did last year, and that, again, is due in part for our officers, Deputy Chief Brock and his personnel, and Lieutenant Wheela and hers, doing a lot of projects to keep these numbers down, to keep, and we keep catching these folks and prosecuting them. Our 2020 or 2021 year-to-date property crimes, this is the same information as it was on the first slide, just breaks it up a little bit more so you can see exactly where our increases are. As I stated earlier, residential, commercial, non-res burgs, all down below the 2020 numbers. Our B&Es have gone up slightly. Auto burglaries, as stated before, is 25% increase. Felony larceny thefts, largely driven by catalytic converter thefts, is up 117. Our misdemeanor larceny thefts, 7% increase. Misdemeanor larceny threats we've seen a significant increase of stealing items from somebody's front yard and or backyard. Bikes, lawnmowers, we've even had wheelbarrows stolen. All things of that nature are all reported as misdemeanor larcenies. Our misdemeanor shoplifting has gone down, and kudos to Lieutenant Wheela and her work with the Las Cruces Retail Asset Protection Association. There was a time when misdemeanor shoplifting was accounted for 1/3 of all thefts in Las Cruces. But due to their work with this association, they've been able to bring that number down significantly. We continue to work with our retail partners as well as our local partners, our law enforcement partners and federal partners to bring that number down. Vehicle thefts, again, stated earlier, this is a problem. And I also forgot to mention that 33% of our vehicle thefts are all vehicles that are left unsecured or the keys somewhere that they can find them. So again, these are very easy vehicle theft for somebody that's stealing vehicles, and the keys left in the vehicle or the vehicle is left unlocked, makes it that much easier. So we have put up some information through our PAIO office to keep citizens aware that they have to lock things and keep things out of their vehicle to keep criminals at bay a little bit. Our arsons are at 250% increase. We get the arsons reported to us, but they are investigated out through the Las Cruces Fire Department. They are the investigating unit for that. So total property crimes thus far, we have an 11% increase over 2021 with a downward trajectory in several of our residential commercial burgs. We're hoping that that number will drive that 403.96 total property crimes down for this year. This is our 5-year trend. And with that, I'm going to bring up Lieutenant Peter Bradley. He runs our criminal investigations section. He'll be going over our clearance rates as well as some metro narcotics numbers, and then we will stand for questions after the presentation.
Thank you, sir. So first, when we talk about clearance rates, we have to understand what exactly a case cleared is. By FBI standards, they're going to be cleared upon arrest. Whether there is a warrant issued for that person's arrest, it's been sent forward for prosecution. All of those would be considered cleared by arrest. The other accepted clearance is an exceptional clearance, which would be if the crime is not within our jurisdiction and we cannot enforce it, or if we have enough to go forward but the victim refuses to pursue any kind of charges with us. When we compare the city of Las Cruces numbers to the national average, we are above the national average in everything except burglary, and we're tied with the national average. As the chief alluded to earlier, with homicides, the national average is about 62% of homicides are solved. Right now, year to date, we're at 100. Same thing when we say sexual assault by FBI standards, that would be forcible rape. 68% of that is solved by our agency, 33 is the national average. And it carries on the rest of the way. Robberies, we solve better than half of our robberies. Aggravated assaults are also well higher. And that just kind of carries over. Motor vehicle thefts is the closest we have to the national average outside of burglary, which is 25% versus a 14 average for the nation.
No, Lieutenant, excuse me, you said these are clearance rates, so these means that you've been able to solve these?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
So these would be, like I said, these would either be solved or we could solve them, but the victim doesn't want to pursue.
Okay.
This is not the amount of crimes that happen. Of basically the cases that get referred to my section, roughly 44% of them are assigned out, but this would be of the 100% of cases that are sent to us. As the chief also kind of spoke to, we have to understand that there's a narcotics nexus with crime in general. A lot of property crime, but also, as he also pointed out, a lot of violent crime. Robberies, things like that, all have this narcotics nexus going with it. Metro Narcotics year to date has had 234 call-outs. With that, they have 313 arrests. They've served 47 search warrants and had 27 different undercover operations. A call-out, so that you would understand, would be if a patrol officer in the field has uncovered somebody with a felony level of narcotics, whether it's heroin, methamphetamine, or anything like that, and then they would contact an investigator with Metro Narcotics to continue that investigation. For their seizures, right now they have 105.7 pounds of methamphetamine, 23.2 pounds of cocaine, 10,399 fentanyl pills, 1 pound of heroin, 4.6 pounds of marijuana, and as we all know, firearms tend to go hand in hand with narcotics. They've also seized 38 firearms. And as far as strategy goes, I will pass that to Deputy Chief Brock.
Before DC Brock is there, Councilor Beta-Stuvey, when do you have to leave?
Mayor, I can stay till about 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Oh, okay, good. So you've got a little bit of time. I just wasn't too sure. I was going to let you ask a few questions, but if you've got that much time, we'll go ahead and continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, good afternoon. Deputy Chief Brock, Deputy Chief of Operations for the Police Department. I'm going to cover this slide and talk about some of the strategies that we employ with operations at the Police Department. The first one you see is community policing initiatives, and this doesn't refer to the actual going out and making contact with the community. Sometimes it does with the patrol officers, but under operations, what we're talking about is working hand in hand with our community partnership officers, the community outreach officers that Lieutenant Wheeler will talk about here later on in the presentation. So I don't want to steal too much from her, but on a normal day-to-day basis, patrol and community outreach are working projects together. They're sharing intel together. They're checking statuses. They're getting information from the intel section, identifying problematic areas, issues that are going on, different crime trends, and then they're working hand in hand with each other in order to find solutions for those crime problems that we're seeing. Some examples are the auto burglaries and the auto thefts that we're seeing. They work hand in hand with each other, sharing intel, identifying suspects involved, and work together. They also, with community outreach officers, will work with both neighborhood homeowners, residents, and also commercial owners of businesses throughout town. The next bulletin there is interagency intelligence meetings and our justice partners. What we're referring to here is our intel section, which is under or reports directly to the chief now. They look at the intel, the crime coming in on a daily basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, and they're sharing that information on a daily basis with patrol operations. So every day we get a crime report from the previous day, and we use that in conjunction with determining exactly where and how we need to deploy our resources, where we may need to conduct special projects, whether they need to move or we need to slow down on one and develop another one, depending on the intel and the crime information that we're getting from the intel section. And it goes both ways. Patrol will develop some of their own intel immediately during the day while they're taking calls for service. And they'll go over and speak with intel and start sharing information immediately. So we try to get that as quickly as we can in order to deploy our resources in the most progressive manner in order to address the crimes that we're seeing pop up. And this also includes our Cjcc meetings. That's our Criminal Justice Council meetings with all our justice partners here in town. That includes the courts, adult probation, parole, CYFD. Lieutenant Bradley is now attending those meetings, and we pass along information with the courts in regards to procedures and different things that are going on with the court. It was big during COVID because there was a lot of things that needed to be adjusted, and then we pass that information along to the officers. Our problem-oriented projects and our directed patrols, and this kind of goes back into the intel, so sometimes I'm going to be going back and forth between the different bullets here on the presentation. Our problem-oriented projects and directed patrols, these address the different types of crimes that I was speaking about earlier and going about how to deploy our resources. Burglary, auto theft, larceny, the catalytic converter thefts, many of the things that Chief has already mentioned. This also includes traffic issues that come up. We'll determine what kind of project, whether it's frequent patrol, bike patrol, foot patrol, how best to address the issue. A lot of those include, for example, the mall parking lot where we were seeing some catalytic converter thefts, the retail parking areas where you had the same occurring, and also larceny thefts. So it really depends on the type of crime that we're seeing or noticing come up, but we'll deploy our resources in the best manner and determine what's best to do that, whether it's just a frequent patrol. In other words, the patrol officers try to be a presence in the area more often to deter crime, or if we're going to use an unmarked vehicle with officers inside it to conduct surveillance, to watch for thefts or see what's going on, bike patrol or foot patrol. Our community and retail partnerships. Again, this includes community outreach officers assisting with patrol, and we'll work hand in hand. The street crimes unit, which is also under operations, we'll work with our local motel hotels. A lot of times we have a lot of narcotic activity at the hotels, motels, and when you have the narcotics going on, you have stolen vehicles, you have auto burglaries and other theft that seems to follow. So we'll work with the managers and business owners of the different hotels and motels in order to find solutions for the problems that they're having at their businesses. As Chief mentioned, Lcpd will work hand in hand with the retail businesses in order to address shoplifting and thefts, larcenies at the businesses. Again, sharing information, known offenders will issue trespass warnings to offenders that are caught shoplifting so that they know they can't return to the retail establishment. So we'll work hand in hand with them to try to address those issues with the different retail businesses. The online reporting, again, we encourage people to use the online reporting system. We check that on a daily basis, as Chief mentioned. This also includes, anonymous reporting, Crime Stoppers tips. But the important thing about the online reporting is it also helps to free up the officers in the field because they may not necessarily have to respond to the actual address, and it allows them to be more proactive and work a project or frequent patrol an area where there's high crime going on. Crime forecasting, again, this goes back to the intel section. Daily crime report, mapping of crimes. The daily crime report actually has a map on it that's a hotspot type map where the officers can take a look at that and actually see, okay, the day before on my shift, where was the problem, or the night before, and get an idea of how best they need to approach their patrol on that day. That includes trends, methods of operation by the offenders. How are they committing the crimes? Are they going through windows? Are they checking doors? Are they breaking glass? And then we also put out information about known offenders that we know are active in an area or a group of offenders and are actively committing crimes in certain areas. Our smart technology deployment, this includes our the surveillance trailers that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And what's important about that is that it gives us real-time monitoring. We can look at a specific location in real time and see what's going on there. I think you're familiar that we used them down in the downtown mall for quite a while, and that gave us real-time monitoring so that we could see actually what was going on and whether or not we needed to get some resources to that area. Technology also includes our drone program at the police department. We've expanded the drone program, has a variety of uses, and again, it's given us real-time feedback when we utilize the drones. We've used them to track suspects after a crime. We've used them to follow stolen vehicles so that we're not in a vehicle pursuit and they don't even know the drone's following them. Then they park and we move in and apprehend the offender. And again, as technology continues to advance and develop and change, we'll continue to find new technology that can assist us with fighting crime here in the city. And we'll work towards getting that at the police department. So that's the last item that was on my list. And I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Gutierrez for my internal affairs.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. I'm Lieutenant Gutierrez, part of the Internal Affairs. A little background on it. We do honest, fair, and thorough investigations to ensure the integrity of the organization, the safety of the community, and the rights of citizens and employees alike. Internal Affairs is comprised of an Internal Affairs Lieutenant, a Sergeant, 2 investigators, and we are progressive in the area that we have a Compliance Sergeant and an R&D Specialist. Now, the Compliance Sergeant, we are 1 out of 3 in the entire United States that we're aware of that has a Compliance Sergeant. He's responsible, or she is, ensures that Lcpd complies with the current and upcoming laws and trends, reviews policies, standard operating procedures, by researching policy and procedures through suggestions of the IA investigations and our OIR group reviews, and through the citizens, through the community, as well as we've looked into a couple of things from City Council as well. So internal affairs updates are going to involve, I'll just go a little bit of background. Our internal investigations are investigations that are related to misconduct or operational actions of employees on or off duty, and they're created internally. External investigations, or as we consider EI, as you can see on the slide, there's different categories, a 1, 2, or 3. A 1 is going to be a formal, requiring extensive follow-up. Category 2 is going to be an informal, where the citizen only wants to inform the supervisor that something may be occurring and wants to make sure that it is lawful and proper. And then a category 3 is when a complaint that we're unable to articulate a bona fide complaint. So just as a reminder of those. The current update is we've had 21 sustained where the conduct allegedly apparently occurred and amounts to a violation of general orders and or other city policies or procedures. We've had 4 non-sustained. In other words, insufficient evidence exists to clearly prove or disprove the allegations. 3 were unfounded. The acts alleged apparently did not occur. 20 of them, there was no findings. The complaint found was to be false or erroneous. 3 were exonerated. Employees' conduct was lawful, justified, and proper. So what this says is 59% of complaints are found to be within policy, and it shows that we are continuing to develop and train our officers. And once again, this includes going back to our compliance sergeant, going back and reviewing policies and changing some items, which brings us to the research and development and the OIR group. So 12 cases have been sent for reviews to the OIR group since May of 2021. And through that, we've received several positive reviews. Most of them were positive, but there were some changes that we did make on there. Most of them were correction in language. In other words, who the policy applied to. Some of them were online training refreshers that people needed to be reminded that we do have a policy or a standard operating procedure in place for certain items or events. The transparency page was needed to be updated to compare the new policies that had just been passed. 1 or 2 of them, OIR found that they didn't match the policies that we sent them. In other words, we didn't update it on time, so that was taken care of as well. So those are some of the suggestions that were given to us, and we actually look at them, took into consideration, and changed some either standard operating procedures or the policies. Now, as far as research and development goes, there was 19 policy updates. Some were needed, they were just outdated. Others were completed through the assistance of the OIR group. 3 policies were actually created that needed to be created that, once again, we're trying to be progressive and stay ahead of the curve. In CIT, crisis intervention training, we've improved that so we can track where mental health issues are a factor at certain calls. We've made it so the officers can make an assessment if a person was intoxicated or possibly suffering from mental illness. Our de-escalation efforts are now being tracked. And with that, that ends the internal affairs update, and I will turn it over to Sergeant Austin.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Cody Austin. I'm a sergeant with the Academy section. So before you is just a comparison between the requirements of Nmla for the minimum required for officers to obtain their certification and a comparison with our department and what we offer. The standard set by Nmla is 677 hours. Our agency, as of the last academy, our 50th academy, is at 1,081 hours. There's a breakdown or comparison between the two. To your left is what the state requirement is, and below ours, under the 1,081 hours, you can see we increased some of our training in specifically domestic violence. We offer 32 hours, but on top of that, we also offer scenario-based training to our officers. We also exceed the standard in our use of force and defensive tactics. CIT and communication skills, we're at an additional 24 hours, and we also offer a total of 136.5 hours related to firearms. This next slide is the standard that's set by the state for officers to maintain their certification. These are the 2021 Nmla requirements and training that has been conducted so far by our agency to maintain our compliance. In addition to that, our agency has also required all of our officers to attend the following. We've required our officers to attend 4 hours of realistic de-escalation training, interactions with persons with mental illness for an additional 4 hours, which includes virtual reality training with empathy training scenarios. We were fortunate enough to partner with Hearts of Autism for a 2-hour training, so officers are aware of the autism community that we may encounter. In addition, we've recently wrapped up our fair and impartial policing and reality-based training scenarios in the spring and in the fall. Recently, our department was awarded the de-escalation grant for a total of $188,500. The goal of this grant is to help improve de-escalation training. Some of the highlights of this grant is to increase our virtual reality training systems, have additional instructor training in de-escalation and crisis communication, continue our partnership and obtaining professional actors for our crisis intervention courses and our realistic training. We also hope to improve some of our equipment and to also help with the cost for overtime and additional training hours that we're going to require of the officers. So far, related to our recruiting efforts, specifically to laterals, this is still open for lateral officers. We recently had an increase for our incentives, and so far we have had 5 that have successfully passed the hiring step. We currently have 1 who is about to complete his field training program. Currently, we have 3 laterals that are in our lateral academy that will graduate this Friday and be hitting the streets effective on Sunday. We have 1 that will start in January 2022 with an additional 8 that are in the wings or in the hiring process right now. Our recruiting efforts, this is specifically related to our cadets. At the end of our hiring efforts, we received over 700 applications for the 51st Academy. This is because of some of the incentives. It significantly boosted our application numbers. We were open for about 3 months, and we were hovering around 300 to 350 applicants, and we had kind of stalled. And with the incentives that we brought in, actually boosted our number above the 700 mark. The incentive significantly increased the number of college applicants. Currently, we're in the polygraph stage of the hiring process, and of the remaining 64% of those applicants do have some type of formal college education as well. So, in short, we're very optimistic about the upcoming academy in January of 2022 by being able to fill the 25 slots, even up to 30 if possible. And with that, I'll turn it over to Lieutenant Wiedela.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, City Councilors. Good afternoon, citizens at home. It is good to be here today, and I am here to talk about our community partnership, community engagement, community outreach. First off, as far as the last quarter, what we were able to do, we still consisted and conducted those neighborhood watch meetings. I'd like to definitely put a shout out to Officer Glimp here. When peak was initiated, we started with 7 neighborhood watches. We are currently now at 23. National Night Out occurred this last quarter. Again, I'm going to champion Officer Glimp here. I will go further into detail later in a slide in reference to National Night Out, but that is something that is known nationwide. It occurs every first Tuesday in August. We also championed our summer internship program. This was started a couple years back, where what we're doing is we're partnering with NMSU and DACC, where they will send us students for an internship. What we like to do is specifically look at what area of study are you going into? What are you interested in? So we've had both undergrads and grads. Some undergrads are like, I don't know what I want to do. And so then we purposely come up with a program for them that really demonstrates all the different aspects of the department and to really get them as included in those programs as possible. But then if they do have a specific, like for instance, I really want to become a detective, then we try to get them as many hours as possible with Lieutenant Bradley and his section. So that took place as well. Presentations are ongoing. I'd like to champion Officer Kelly here. He was reached by one of our high schools and asked to come up with a vaping, some kind of vaping presentation because they're having issues with the vaping. He ran with this, came up with a whole program that he likes to call Connect, Protect, and Respect. And Las Cruces Public Schools got word. He's presented it, I want to say, to a good dozen different schools now, both middle schools, high schools, and even like presented it like elementary school wise for their Red Ribbon Weeks. So wonderful. Assisted living facilities. This is where we've come up with, again, different presentations in reference to frauds, just scams, again, for that specialized population group. DUI awareness. This is one of my passions, as well as Lieutenant Gutierrez, who you just met. We were able to partner again with our National Guard, and they wanted us to come in and actually give them some training in reference to, hey, what is your DUI awareness? What is occurring in this area? And a shout out to Sergeant Chavez there too. The movie night, this is where I want to champion Officer Hernandez. This took place back in July at Apodaca Park with our Mobile Operations Command. And this is where we were able, again, to make those partnerships, including like different, again, restaurants, a construction business, all these people coming out through the woodwork to make this happen, where we offered free hot dogs, free pizza, free popcorn, and we're able to put on a great big movie within Apodaca Park. There's significance to this one, because obviously it was after a tragic event, and we wanted to show our community how much we cared about them and how we wanted them to feel safe, but then also have a reporting spot to address their concerns. Some ongoing community engagement projects. Special Olympics Tippecop took place this last quarter. Again, this is specific to codes where they partner again with the Special Olympics, but then officers, myself included, love to help out with this one, where what we do is usually it's at a restaurant. This last time it was at Andalays, and we're raising money to help Special Olympics, and that money goes towards their equipment, it goes towards their uniforms, and it goes to travel for different events. Also, another program that Codes champions is the Golden Shield program, where that helps and assists people with Codes violations that we would normally cite for, but instead we say, hey, wait a second, there's a special situation here where this individual can't take care of these violations, so let's get them some assistance. Some other things that we've done this last quarter is we had several different meetings with subcommittees in reference to our animal ordinance update. The update did occur as far as Chapter 7, and now we are currently working on that trap, neuter, and release program. We also did several different identichiles bike rodeos. This is something that, again, community outreach does as far as the identichiles taking their fingerprints. The bike rodeos is specifically put on by our code section, but it is something that, for instance, an event will be held, like Pachanga this last month, where they'll reach out to us and say, hey, we really like it when you have those bike rodeos. Can you show up with it? Hence, we'll show up and we'll participate. Urban dweller projects. For those that don't know me, that's where I say it's our homeless community, like population, okay? We have several projects for this throughout the whole city. Most of the time, what we're addressing here is not necessarily felony crime, but it's the misdemeanor crime, where what we're running into a lot of the times is the criminal trespassing, the criminal damage to property, the littering. And so again, it's having people like Officer Klimek, I'll champion him here, where he's done things like working with like the Burn Lake, which is the next like category, where we go in, we take a look at what's occurring, we see how we can address them, connect them with different facilities, and then say, okay, how can we help? And again, a lot of this is like, again, back to those partnerships. Again, some ongoing projects. We have the package theft project. This again it's gonna come around. Holidays are starting again. So this is in reference to people leaving packages on the front porches, but it's the Amazon, it's the UPS. Again, we've been able to partnership with them as far as contacting their drivers, as far as like working with their drivers, and even just simply having a cell phone contact, cell phone information, having those officers, Officer Paulos, Officer Rodriguez, having those contact information so that if we do have a UPS driver saying, hey, I think there's somebody following me, they can simply make that phone call and we can respond and say, okay, let's look into this. Let's take a further look. Shoplifting Project. Again, this is happening at different retail stores across our area, but it's connecting again with those businesses and saying, where are you having issues? When are you having issues? And again, trying to facilitate and problem solve as best as we can. Same thing with the storage unit. It's, again, working with those different storage unit facilities to say, okay, where are we having the issues? Again, when it comes to those partnerships, it's also looking at things like, hey, like, is there a problem with the fencing? Is there a problem with the lighting? Because again, it's one of those things where we want to take a look at all angles as how we can best resolve those problems. Play streets and block parties. This has been a huge success, and we've done it in different areas around the cities, again, partnering with Parks and Rec through the city, and I will go into this point a little later too. We've also did a bicycle registration along with a VIN etching for the UTVs. Again, this can be and something that we offer to our community where people can, again, register their bicycles. Again, not every crime is going to be a felony crime, and a lot of times the misdemeanor crimes can have devastating effects. This is where, again, we can have the kids that have their bicycles stolen, but if we're able to take those registrations in and actually have the VIN numbers associated with those bicycle registrations, it gives us more to go off of. Business decals, this is where I'm going to champion Officer Rodriguez. So we talked about how we have the smart technology and how we have the capability of going in with those video cameras. Wonderful, and it's a great deterrent. We've seen it already work with the different projects, especially like in Burn Lake, especially in downtown. However, we can't afford to have all of those smart technologies at every single location in the city. But again, Officer Rodriguez, thinking outside the box, he came up with this sticker decal, where literally what the sticker says is that Lcpd can and does have access to the business's cameras. And so this business can put a sticker, dink, right up in their window that says, hey, guess what, everybody? Lcpd readily has access to our cameras. And again, those business cameras can be Ring cameras, can be any cameras that that business is using, but that business is saying, hey, guess what? We're partnering with Lcpd and making sure that we're ensuring our safety and our patrons' safety. Libby visits. For those that may not know, we do have a dog in our code section named Libby. Libby has been around for 13 years. Libby, in this last quarter, visited some elementary schools. Libby is all about keeping our earth and our community green and works hand in hand with Keep Las Cruces Beautiful. New partnerships. We're always looking to establish different partnerships. And again, thinking outside of the box. So some of the ones that we highlighted this last quarter, again, thinking outside of the box, we reached out to EBID, like in reference to, hey, our urban dwellers, where are they going? Like a lot of times it is those irrigations. So can we contact EBID? Can we work in partnership with them and see what's happening in reference to that? Other things, we worked with local breweries, wanting to, again, looking at how they can keep their establishments safe. So again, establishing those new partnerships. And again, we assisted with different parades, Red, White, and Blue Parade for 4th of July. We worked with one of our assisted living facilities as far as giving them a caravan parade. And then this is one of those ongoing ones where a lot of times we'll get that opportunity, whether it's a children's birthday, whether it's somebody that just found out they're in remission as far as cancer, but we're able to like put on a little parade that will brighten their day. Okay, let's get into the highlights. First off, I know several of you have heard of Lcpd Cares, right? I'm seeing nods, okay. I'm seeing head shaking, yes, yes. Great, well here's the thing. We do have Lcpd Cares and we wanna highlight that, but we wanna also say, it's not a program. It's a philosophy. We look at it as a way of life. And so in other words, that's us saying, guess what, Las Cruces community? We care about you, we care for you, we care with you. And so we just really want to highlight Lcpd Cares. I look at it as, again, a philosophy, and do I dare say, trying to create even that culture as far as like us caring and caring for our community. Because again, a lot of us live here, work here, grew up here, have our children growing up here, and so we do, we care for it. With that, as far as the last quarter, some things that I do want to highlight is we had our youth leadership camps. So those are the camps put on in the summertime, specifically usually in June and July, by our school resource officers. Highlighted one in particular, Officer Yarnell. He was recognized as Officer of the Year by the Las Cruces Greater Chamber of Commerce. Kudos. So again, this is something that we've been able to partnership with, and we've partnered with New Mexico Foundation, University Foundation, but then also Las Cruces Public Schools. And then we've been able to give these youth leadership camps, again, usually it's 6 sessions in the summertime, 1-week sessions, up to 25 kids per session. It's entirely free, and then they do different activities throughout the day. So yes, there might be some presentations, like a Libby presentation that we talked about, but then also we've incorporated life skills. I loved it. When I showed up one time, the kids were learning how to change a tire. And I thought, how appropriate, very appropriate. But then we are also able to do some additional partnerships this year where we partnered with National Guard, and they were amazing. We're the last day of camp. On some of the weeks, they were able to fly in the helicopter and actually have the kids go into the helicopter and show them the helicopter. Again, it's a great way of being proactive and in the community and getting those officers, aware and like having those relationship with those kiddos. The next thing I want to highlight is National Night Out, and particularly highlight Officer Glimp here because he has ran and organized this for several years now. Again, National Night Out occurs that first Tuesday in August, and it's like the largest block party, so to speak. And if you look at the history of it, it actually started as a little block party, but the whole goal of it is to bring the community out and get the community to know their law enforcement and their first responders. Officer Glimpf has been able to expand our National Night Out in Las Cruces, where this last go around we had 70+ participating agencies, whether that be our own, the fire department, but then other places too, including state police, again, like a variety of different people. Next bullet point is those block parties and play streets. Again, this has become very successful. Kudos to our Parks and Rec department because it's been working hand in hand with them. And what we're doing is actually saying, okay, community over here, our community over here, we're going to block off this street for a certain amount of time, and we're going to provide family-friendly events that the kids can come and enjoy. Major shout out to Officer Johnny Rivera in this one, where he was working on his master's degree. And so what he did for a particular block party that we did was he went into the initial community at first, did a survey as reference to, hey, how do you feel about police officers? What would you like to see more of? And when he got those surveys back, he discovered that, okay, a lot of them, the community is saying, okay, we like our police, but man, there's really nothing for the kids here. And so he got really involved and discovered, okay, working again in partnership, there's nothing for the kids here. What can I do? We discovered in this particular area that they needed a basketball court and that they had one, but that it was full of different construction material and that the kids weren't using it because, well, it's not available because it's full of construction material. So again, it was working with our community, working with different stakeholders, bringing them in, working with our summer intern, bringing her in and saying, okay, can we get people to like work together to make this like an actual like basketball court that we can play on. All of that took place. We were able to do it. We were able to celebrate as far as, hey, now you have a place to come and play. Hey, you know, the grandparents that were living in that community, they can now have their kids over and say, hey, go play, like, you know, some basketball, go play next to that park. So again, block parties and play streets, we discovered that that's really taken off. We had one in the Weed and Seed, like as far as like the schools, and again, I can't say enough about it. Another one of the highlights, you know what, and I have pictures that I was forgetting to flip through. Here we go with the youth leadership camps. That was our helicopter, or not ours, but the National Guard's in partnership with us. That was National Night Out. And here we go with the block parties or play streets. And again, champion Officer Rivera, that's him playing basketball there. And the next one I wanted to champion was, again, Officer Rodriguez, where he realized that if we're running with this LCPD cares and really making it a philosophy, then guess what? We want to be able to sort of like shout it out. And so this is where he came up with a brilliant idea of, hey, I've heard of different rock art, and I've seen it in our community. And so we were able to work with Kathy Morrow, and she was able to organize a whole group and a great team. And it was everybody from NMSU, different volunteers throughout the city, again, that organized this beautiful mural that now you can see over at our East Mesa Public Safety Complex. Now, this isn't the only thing that I'm excited about. So those are the 4 highlights as far as like what community outreach did this last quarter. But what we're super excited about is we have community advocates in the process right now. They've already gone through the backgrounds, and it's my understanding, Chief, that they are ready to go, fingers crossed. But here's the cool thing about that, is a lot of times, especially like in our community partnership and with the community policing officers, we can definitely start something, and we're excited about it, like similar to those block parties, and we can get everything like going. But sometimes it's really hard to do the follow-up, and especially when it comes to even the crimes that we are seeing. It's having those connections to say, okay, we're caring for the community, but how can we do better as far as the follow-up? So that's where our community advocates come into play. They are going to be there to identify the needs and identify the gaps in service. They're going to engage in those community members who have been identified as having social barriers, such as housing, food insecurity, transportation, employment, education, and legal aid services. So in other words, they're that bridge. They're going to be all about bridging that gap and saying, okay, we truly do care for you. Here are the services within our community. Because what we've discovered is we've got several great stakeholders here. We've got several great, wonderful people living in this community that want to help, that want to do better as far as like the whole community at large. And so by us having these community advocate members, they're going to be able to like make connections and say, okay, person, like, yes, I see that you could use assistance here. Let me help you like get in contact with that assistance. And so again, that is in the works, and hopefully next quarter, we'll have some updates in reference to how they are assisting and how they are helping. But yes, we want to let you know that we do care. We care about you, we care about the community, we care about everybody that's here. This is all of our home. This is where we're growing up, this is where we're raising our kids. And so yes, LCPD cares.
Thank you, Lieutenant. She's very, very enthusiastic, as you could tell. And we'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And let me go right to Councilor Beta Stuvey so she can ask her questions in case she needs to leave suddenly. Councilor, are you still there? Councilor Beta Stuvey? Okay, well, I'll go check on her in a minute. So I'll start with...
Mayor?
Yes?
My apologies. She texted me that she got disconnected and she had to jump off, and I just realized.
Oh, okay, no problem. So I'll start with Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilor Flores and then yourself.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, and all your staff. Very impressive, all the work and programming that you have. Completely supportive of you all and the work that you do. I'm especially excited about the cadets and the laterals. I think that's going to be so helpful to all of you. So keep us posted on how that is all faring for you. Some of my questions are around. Let me get to them. I've highlighted. Sorry, I feel like a little. Your interagency intelligent meetings with the justice partners, when do they happen and are they open to the public?
Mayor Pro Tem, The interagency intelligence meetings are done once a month, and we invite different organizations, but we invite the Sheriff's Department, State Police, our federal agencies. We have hideout representatives, Metro Narcotics. It's a law enforcement intelligence meeting, so we can share information throughout the law enforcement community that's pretty much privy to law enforcement.
Okay, all right, good.
The Justice Partners meeting occurs every other week? It's once a month as well, and it involves a municipal court, magistrate court. And they go over different issues that they're seeing in the court systems, including how we can improve our prosecutions, things of that nature. So that goes on monthly, and that can be attended by the public.
Okay, all right, thank you. And slide 12, the community and retail partnerships. You spoke a little bit about it, but what does it include, very specific? So, for example, I'm a business person, and I've experienced maybe a crime, and you've done all the investigating and whatnot. What can I do? And maybe I don't have proper lighting and alarm systems. I know that you have possibly programming that folks can reach out to you and say, do you think you can come, right, and educate me, look at the way my store is set up, and give me some pointers in terms of how safely we can have the setup in our store. Can you talk a little bit? I know because we've talked about this before, but I was hoping you'd mention it. It didn't happen, so.
Mayor Pro Tem, so we do, our community partnership officers go out and do safety assessments. If it's a neighborhood, they'll do a safety assessment of the neighborhood and look at lighting. We recently had one with the community around Med Park to look at some areas specifically with lighting, because that's the issue in there, or a large part of the issue. But we're able to get our community partners or retail agencies and come up and talk to us. This is what I have going on in my area, be it if it's outside. If it's an indoor problem, we'll go do an assessment as well as looking for shoplifting areas that are dangerous, things of that nature. We'll also partner with the fire department so they can go and look at safety as hazards, but we'll look at other things as far as how can they keep shoplifting from occurring, or keep their personnel safe and their customers safe as well.
Sure, thank you.
All the way up to active shooter training.
So, Chief, is that something that's more reactionary in terms of something happens, and then then I'll have to advocate for myself as a business person to you to ask for that, or do you widely advertise this particular project or program that you have? Like, where would businesses find this out?
Mayor Pro Tem, so we have we're proactive on it because we see a spike in shopliftings in a strip mall, for example. We'll go, and even though all the other stores, it might just be one store that's having the issue, we'll make contact with the rest of the establishments in that strip mall, let them know there's been a rise in shopliftings, for that matter, and ask them if they would like to partner in with the Retail Asset Protection Association. Most times we get yes, and we get a lot of involvement that way. They want to be officially involved, or they just want notifications when things are happening in their area. But we do go over there and solicit their input and try to get them involved with the association. But we also do things through community partnership. We have some items on our transparency page, and our transparency page is a work in progress, but we can add a little bit more information as to how people can get involved that way.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, Chief, if it's listed in our transparency page, maybe working with our chambers to include our community development. You know, they have a list, an email list of our businesses, right, our licenses, and it would be nice to maybe send email, but a document of sorts that says, look, if you're looking for this, we care about you. This is what we could do for you. Let us know. I think being much more proactive about it, I think what I hear mostly is when bad things happen is when everybody starts to be more reactionary, right? And understanding that maybe our environment isn't as safe in terms of lighting and alarm systems and those things. So that would be one of my recommendations moving forward, that probably goes across not only LCPD, but our community development, and maybe something that sits in our website through the Economic Development Department's page would be helpful. And then my next question is on the smart technology. How many of those apparatuses do you have, and how much do they cost, and how do we get more?
Mayor Pro Tem, we currently have 5 towers. 2 of them are brand new, so they're just barely getting set up with camera systems. As far as how expensive they are, it depends on what we put on them. Obviously, the better systems, the more expensive cameras, things of that nature, are going to drive the price up. But to answer your question, an average price is about $100,000 for 2 of them. Is what we just bought. Yeah. So $50,000, and we'd like to get a little bit fancier with the cameras, but price dictates.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. And going back to the data that you shared with us, Chief, related to, I'm just remembering, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name who presented this, but that there's always this element of narcotics, right, that to some of our crime. Are you seeing lower level drug dealers, if you will, that are kind of getting involved in things that they know really very little about and find themselves in violent situations? Or do we have these bigger operations that we should be concerned about?
Mayor Pro Tem, if I'm understanding your questions, are we talking, your question is it street level crime that we're seeing, or things such as the cartels and things of that nature?
Yes.
So it's been recently out there that there has been some incidents that there are some large organizations, to include cartels, that do operate in this area and are constantly trying to get business, for lack of a better word, for their organizations. Most of the crime that we're seeing, aggravated assaults, violent crime-wise, has to do with street-level crime.
So then to drill down more, Chief, maybe I didn't make myself clear around those the drug types of crime, like the drug dealers. They're smaller, more brand new to the system, if you will. I don't really know the terminology and how to describe it, but I guess I'm interested because I read an article recently about a program or a project that they're conducting at Tucson, Arizona, related to sort of those lower level drug dealers, and communicating with them and saying, look, we care about you. It's not going to end well. We should intervene, and these are the projects or programming that we can make available to you. And I thought, hey, that's kind of a cool. I don't know how new and how successful it's been, but I thought that it feels like when we get the texts that these kinds of things are happening, that it feels like it's these lower level drug dealers that don't have any experience, and then that there's a lot of violence and gun violence especially. And so I'm just trying to figure out other programming that we might institute that will be helpful to try to deter some of these, to getting into, just getting in deeper, if you will.
Mayor Pro Tem, we have looked at several other programs, and as you well know, I like to plagiarize a good program if I find one. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of them that we've been looking at to target people that are new to the trade. Mm-hmm. Hardened criminals and the larger organizations are very hard to target that way because they're hardened. But to your point, there are some low-level street crime folks that are dealing low-level drug stuff that it's just not good for them. You're not very good at this. Maybe we can provide you an avenue to get out of the get out of the business. So we are looking at a couple of programs through Metro Narcotics and HIDA as well.
That's great, Chief. Thank you. And then slide 15, Chief, around the policies that you updated. What do they consist of? I don't think there was specificity related to the policies. in terms of revisions and the 3 additional policies created? Just a little more detail if you would.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'll defer to Lieutenant Gutierrez on that one. But we do see, they make suggestions. OIR is our auditor, and they make suggestions. Instead of waiting until they report out to City Council, we know that we can jump on top of it and start modifying the policies, but
I love it. Love the initiative. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, Lieutenant Gutierrez. The 3 new policies that we created had to do with liability and protecting us as well as the city. The first one was a gym use policy. The second one was we're still working on this one, the personal communications devices, and an officer wellness policy. Okay, those are the 3 new ones that were developed and are being put into place.
I'm sorry I didn't get the first one.
The first one is the gym use policy, to use our gym.
Yes.
Inside there.
All right. Okay.
And then some of the other policies that were updated were the adult ride-along program, grooming standards, uniforms, assignment of relatives, police reports, awards, complaint investigations, undocumented foreign nationals, use of force, lineups, vehicle pursuits, the early intervention system, outside employment, and recording devices.
So, Lieutenant Gutierrez, can you speak more with more specificity related to the undocumented portion of that, the foreign nationals? What does that consist of? And you had to develop one, or you changed the one you had currently?
We updated the definitions as to what is a foreign national, what is a, the counselor's office, the office, basically all the definitions were updated on it. We didn't really change it, just updated the definitions.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then you made mention about the mental health, something about helping you identify which of these calls had to do with mental health, I guess, and how will that be then distributed to the general public? Did I miss that, or am I?
No, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
On that was part of our blue teams. It is a form that we fill out anytime a use of force or a show of force is used. And we added a block in there which would allow the officers to make an assessment if the person was intoxicated or possibly suffering from mental illness. So we can make that report to our CIT sergeant, and they can do further follow-up from there using some of these statistics.
Okay, and so as far as the CIT follow-up, what does that consist of?
Sergeant McCord is in charge of the crisis intervention team.
Mm-hmm.
He will go out and actually make contact with the individuals, find out if they are receiving current services or are in need of services, and they will become educated on where they can go or how they can receive services.
Okay.
Without going into the exact details of medical.
Okay, all right. And then the training that I'm on to the next section is around training, I think, that you get. New Mexico law enforcement, the domestic violence, 32 scenarios. Are you working with any DV partners like La Casa and or state organizations in terms of the various scenarios that you're exposing your cadets or your current staff?
Mayor Pro Tem, yes, we are. We work with anybody that we can get to assist us in putting these curriculums. Some of them are state-driven, but when we talk about putting together scenarios, things of that nature, we always look for local experts that can assist us in making the training more realistic. So we do partner with local partners.
So not only the scenarios, but what about maybe training specific to domestic violence and do you have that? And what does that consist of? Is it evidence-based programming or is it just maybe a presentation from a DV specialist?
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to defer to Sergeant Austin as he runs the part of the academy. I wouldn't do it justice to explain exactly how they go about getting this.
Sure. Thank you, Chief.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Cody Austin, with the sergeant with the academy. And to answer your question, I believe you are asking if we partner with La Casa or like La Opinion with part of our training scenarios. Is that correct?
It's more about, I think I got the answer related to scenarios, but it's more specific to training that maybe a DV specialist or someone that would not require, but have conferences related to very specifically domestic violence.
Yes, ma'am. So right now we have our domestic violence unit, and that unit specifically works with organizations within the community, and those are our instructors that help develop our scenarios. And so they are actually working hand in hand with these organizations and bringing the most recent experiences and cases with updated case law, and they're developing the scenarios.
Got it.
And from those scenarios, that's what we put together and include in our package for Domestic Violence Week.
Okay, got it. So case law, it's relevant to case law and the scenarios that maybe you might encounter as you walk into a situation.
That is correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And then you mentioned the cadets and the training, the academy, the next academy. What is the cap on that? Can you just say you have 80 people? Can you take 80 people, or is there a cap?
I believe we're currently at 25, Chief, and I will let him answer that question.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, with our current staffing levels and the difficulty in attracting applicants, if we can hire 45, I'm going to beg and plead to hire 45, even though it goes over our 202 authorized.
So Chief, would you have like 2 training sessions, or how would that work? And what would you need from us in terms of resource to make that happen?
Mayor Pro Tem, if we were to hire 30 for this next academy, that would put us right at 202. Our goal, if we don't get there, would be to run back-to-back academies,
Okay.
which case I'd go to the city manager and ask for approval to do that, and then we'd come to you.
Okay, good. Will you let us know what you need from us if you need to do back-to-back and or simultaneous? I don't know if that's possible, of running something here and maybe, I don't know, partnering with another agency that might do that, just so that we're working, so you don't have to wait an extra. How long is the trainings? 30, I don't know how many weeks.
The current academy is set at 22 weeks. And to answer your question, we have gone over a contingency plan if we were able to get in excess of 25 to 30. We do still have our former West Academy, along with our East Mesa Public Safety Complex. And we do have a plan in place, if that was to take place, to where we could accommodate it to maximize our training. And also, after several months go on, if the group lessens, then we can consolidate that at one location.
Good, okay, great. I'm glad I asked that question, yes. And then you mentioned the urban dwellers, and some of the concerns that I get is littering for sure, but the grocery carts. And I know at one time you would have a program that you'd do a sweep every, I don't know, once a month. I'm not sure how frequent it was, but those are probably the more consistent complaints I get is around grocery carts. So, Lieutenant, what do we tell our constituency related to that? Who do they call? Do you need to have a number of complaints in order to get out there? How does that
So
work?
obviously, we always advocate, like if it is a Walmart shopping cart, we advocate for them to
go get it.
Try to contact Walmart and go get it. What we've discovered is a lot of times Walmart necessarily isn't interested in that one shopping cart. And so when we have done these cleanup projects, we've taken the initiative. So, okay, we'll have another cleanup project. Let's see how many shopping carts we get. Guess what? We have trailers. We can go out and we can do this. However, obviously, we would like to encourage something different.
Yeah.
Because it's just that, like, it's a shopping cart. I understand it's part of like the retail business's loss prevention. And when it comes down to it, yes, one shopping cart really doesn't make a difference. But when we can take a picture and see several different shopping carts, that's what it does. And that's usually like if we've got like a good batch of them, then the experience has been, yes, they are interested, because again, that's that whole loss prevention, and they're going to want them back. Obviously, my thing is always encouraging people, well, what can be the solution? You know what, like sometimes it is just that. It's saying, okay, residents, they're not interested, but you know what? I got a Jeep at home and maybe I can come pick it up for you and we can get it over there and just drop it off. Again, it's not a long-term solution. And so this is where it would be, or again, having those meetings with the different retail centers to say, hey, we're having a lot of people taking your shopping carts. What can we do to like solve this? And so having discussions and future discussions in order to make that happen. I can tell you that we do have another cleanup plan for El PASEO coming up November 20th. It's that Saturday, November 20th, I believe it is. And so yes, that will probably entail some shopping carts as well.
Yeah, I know that had been an issue there at that specific location, but now I'm seeing them everywhere, right? Walnut and, close to the Walmart area, Lowman, just in different areas that I've not seen in the past. So I definitely think we should probably put our heads together and figure out a way.
And there was one time where we were trying to even trying to problem solve. Yeah. So for a while there, with our urban dwellers in particular, we were trying even like a backpack type of initiative where we're like, hey, leave the shopping cart, take this free backpack. It sort of worked, but at the same time, sort of what we saw was that they want the backpack and the shopping cart then. And so
some of them are carrying all of their worldly possessions, and it's it's too much. It's too many, I think, for a backpack, but I get it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Maybe we have a conversation with Community of Hope and some others with the chambers and see if they have some suggestions moving
and
forward.
Maybe some kind of alternative.
Yeah.
Yep.
For sure. Thank you, Lieutenant. Yep. And then I'm really excited about your community advocates. I've been advocating for that for some time. I think it's going to be a real asset to you all, especially around the follow-up. I think that's going to be an important avenue or aspect of how the Las Cruces Cares, Lcpd Cares philosophy, not campaign, of philosophy. And so I appreciate all the work that you all have done putting this together and what you continue to do, and please stay safe. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilor Abate-Stuvi unfortunately her plane kept getting delayed, so they decided to drive, so she's on the road. Yeah, so to Phoenix. And also on Councilor Ekman, forgive my manners. The chief's been blocking you here, but I know you're here in support, and good to see you, and thanks for holding up that sign. Jack is here, so. Okay, Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chief, and thank you, lieutenants and officer and lieutenants and who else? Lieutenants. Thank you so much for this very good report to City Council. I think that it's amazing that you do so much, and I think that we will be seeing a lot of good results. And it's good that you explained how there was a certain way of categorizing things, so the number went up, but in fact it was because you had to, when there's 2 or 3 incidents, 2 or 3 crimes or potential crimes in one incident, they're all reported, and so the numbers went up. And I think that Gallagher did that too, Chief Gallagher did that. So again, thank you so much. Now, as far as, I have a question for, I think it was Deputy Chief Brock. Did you do the presentation on crime that included crime forecasting? That would probably be page 14, 13. Yeah, 12. I think that was you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, yes, it was.
Yes, okay. Yeah, first I had to make sure that I had nabbed the right suspect. Okay. So my question is, doing all of, you have your intel section and all that. And now the crime forecasting, what kinds of crimes can you forecast, and how is the forecasting, how is it structured? I mean, can you do crime forecasting? Because if you could, then our crime rate would go down. And then, as I said, it seems like it's gone up, but it has to do also with the way the different, one incident may have 3 instances of potential crimes. So can you explain to us what how this crime forecasting process works, or is applied?
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, yes, I'll do my best to try to explain it to you. So in a perfect world, yeah, we could forecast perfectly. But of course, we want to try to prevent crime. So we're going to look at crime trends, what's going on, who the players are, if they're known, the offenders. We know certain areas of town that we're familiar with where crimes may occur. We may see a pattern one night in a certain area and then deploy our resources trying to forecast where that crime's likely to occur in the future or the next night. We'll look at times of day, days of week, whether it's weekend, is it during night hours, early morning hours, and we'll try to narrow it down using communication through the intel section, with the patrol section, with community outreach, what they're learning, reviewing police reports, so we're getting information from the intel section, trying to put it all together into one thing to best forecast in order to either catch offenders in the act or be a deterrent in that area to push the crime down.
Yes. Yeah, I would assume that that's what you do, but what is it, what sort of data do you gather, and how are you able to gather data? For example, if you were to gather data that shows that there's a higher incidence of a particular crime and then a particular age group, for example. So maybe you have some sort of vandalism going on, and then you identify the area. Maybe it's at the schools, school windows are being broken down, and then you're able to ask maybe community members, do you know of any kids who, have a bad time at school? I don't know how you do that part, but you're somehow able to identify the perpetrators or the suspects, and then you can probably, hopefully, implement some kind of community service, such as Lieutenant Watala went into with really, because I imagine, and I'm imagining, because I don't know if you have these stats, that there's a lot of petty crime going on, and it's probably the younger, younger teenagers. Do you understand what I'm asking about crime forecasting, and how do you get data, and then how you could use that data to, then you would be able to go to those areas to do some education take some, remedial steps.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, I think you're asking specifically how we extract the data that we use to determine. So we'll look at police reports for similar crimes of occurrence, and we'll pull the data as far, like I mentioned before, date, time, day of the week. If we have offender information, we'll look at that information as well. We will, if there's a certain crime that occurs, we'll search for video, has been mentioned in the presentation, to gather further information about vehicles that were possibly used and try to put that information into the picture to narrow down what we're looking for.
And then by narrowing it down, what you're looking for, what further steps then do you take, as a police department, to go to the source of that activity? As I said, maybe it's maybe it's school kids, and I don't mean school kids, but more like the teenagers, the middle-aged school children. So do you go and do you do educational in schools? I'm not sure I saw anything like that. Or Do you have anything like that? Any kind of preventive work once you do the forecasting? Now, since you're able to do crime forecasting and you can probably identify the perps or the people who are engaged in that activity or that behavior.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor Flores, so if we identify the offender that's involved in the activity and we have enough probable cause to charge them with a crime, then a warrant will be issued. The information goes out to the police department. All the officers get it, whether it's through email or through our mobile system, which is our computer-aided dispatch system. And that also communicates with surrounding agencies, and that'll provide the information that, hey, we're looking for this vehicle or this suspect. They have a warrant. The warrant information will be in there, and then the law enforcement community is working together to locate that suspect.
Well, okay, well, I think I haven't made myself clear. My question isn't clear, and I'm not, I think I'll just maybe I'll just ask Chief Dominguez off the record.
Mayor, Councilor Flores, if I could take a stab at this. We have, for example, crime forecasting we know that a certain type of vehicle and a certain color of vehicle are being stolen. And we get that information through sources and through data. That's actually happened, and we'll contact, for example, the mall security, because we know that's where it was occurring. We know that we had a certain type of vehicle, white in color, that was being taken right around this time of day, and they were being taken across state lines. So we partnered with them and gave them the information and became very diligent in looking for that. We also had undercover vehicles in there, and we were able to deter that from occurring.
Yes, and that's what Lieutenant Sergeant was trying to. I'm sorry, the Deputy Chief Brock. So sorry, I'm looking at my list of all of you. I'm so sorry. Yes, and that's what you were explaining to me, and I didn't quite get, but somehow it clicked when, but you were saying the same thing. So I appreciate that very much, Deputy Chief Brock. I also have a question for Lieutenant Gutierrez. So thank you very much, Lieutenant. So you, OIR sends you, you have sent 12 cases to them. So they're limited to reviewing only what you send them. Is that correct?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
It's in the contract of what I have to send them.
I see the give and take of the contract, and it calls for them to review based on what you send them.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that what it, okay. So then you indicated that the reviews were positive and there were 3 cases where they had specific recommendations. Is that did I get my notes straight?
Over several of the reviews, 3 of those recommendations.
Right. And so what were those cases? Because you did say how those you said that they were changes were implemented, that you corrected the logic, maybe my hand, I can't even read my handwriting, that you also have online training refreshers and transparency page update. What exactly does that, what is the content of those changes?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, I don't have the exact reviews with me, but one of the changes out of the 3 is the corrected language. In other words, the policy was unclear as to who it applied to. Mm-hmm. So one of the sentences that we changed in the very beginning of the policy is this policy applies to all LCPD employees, instead of the policy saying that this applies to employees.
Oh, so it was kind of just logistical.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then, and the online refresher, What exactly is that? What kind of training is it, and how long is it? Why is it online, or?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, we have the ability to send out online through the computers. All the officers are issued computers as well. Training refreshers, instead of bringing everybody in all at once, we give them several days to go online and review a video of training that is basically read verbatim. And as the officer's reading the policy verbatim on the training, it's also explained what it means. Certain definitions are expanded upon. OIR hit on a couple of definitions that weren't exactly clear. For example, I run the IA office. Well, IA will be notified, but it didn't specify who will notify the IA office. So a refresher went out to supervisors that they are responsible to notify IA of certain actions. And that is what it means by online training refreshers on that part. And going back to the transparency page, it's a living page that's always constantly being updated. OIR found a couple of outdated policies. Part of the contract was that I supply them with the current LCPD policies and standard operating procedures. They read the whole thing, compared it to our transparency page, and found a couple of items were outdated. It wasn't the same one that they were provided with. So we went back through, looked at it. Oops, somehow we updated the wrong one, and we corrected it and updated the current policy that they had to match. And those are the corrections.
Thank you, Lieutenant. And the question I have is, another question I have is, how do you determine which cases you send to them? How are they randomly selected, or do you look at the ones that maybe you won't be corrected on? I mean, with all due respect, I mean, I need to know, I would like to know what cases. And OIR, I think we contracted with them, OIR, in May, right? Yeah, it was May. So with all due respect, there's been only 12 cases between now and May that you had some questions about yourself insofar as practices go within the police department, or who oversees that? Is there oversight, or who does that? Who makes that determination as to what goes to OIR?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, like I referred back to the contract, all formal completed investigations will be sent to OIR. All our formal complaint investigations are sent to OIR. I do not have a choice in that.
Oh, okay.
There is no I can choose.
Okay, so there's only been 12 formal and finalized complaints, and all 12 went to OIR.
Mayor and Councilor Flores, yes, that is correct.
Oh, good, because that certainly wasn't clear in my mind, and I'm glad that it's as clear as can be, because I ask a lot of questions, but just because I want to be sure. And also, the undocumented nationals, what exactly, how is it that you come upon them, presumably, based on Chief Jaime Montoya's policy, that you do not stop, the LCPD does not stop someone who is suspected to be undocumented? I think all of us, well, most of us up here would be stopped, 24/7. I know, but so were those undocumented nationals they were involved in a suspicious activity, and what do you do with undocumented nationals?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, this was a policy that needed to be updated. It had not been updated since it was implemented. And through our compliance sergeant, the policy came up for review on that. But LCPD doesn't stop everybody or anybody and ask them what their nationality is or what their immigration status is.
Correct.
That is just flat out a policy.
Okay.
A policy that was updated, it was time for it to be updated because it hadn't been touched since it was put into place.
So when you do have someone who's undocumented, how do you find out that they're undocumented? For example, if I were to be arrested, would you be asking me to show proof of citizenship or nationality?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, we don't ask you for proof of nationality or anything like that. If you are stopped and detained, we're going to ask you for common information and try and get a positive identification through you through MRVDA, through Mesilla Valley Regional Dispatch Authority. If one doesn't come back, it depends on the situations, whether we continue further question you about the incident of why we stopped you, but not where you come from.
Okay, so you stop, it's a PC, it's a probable cause stop.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Gutierrez. And then I have a question for the sergeant who presented on NMLA. And Chief Dominguez, what's his name? His last name?
Sergeant Austin.
Austin, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation, Sergeant Austin. I have a question about the in-service training, and then there was also a training on each in-service training found at page 18, training found at page 19. And what the in-service training, what does that consist of? And is it across the board for every officer, every police officer, everybody who's involved with the public?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, looking at the training on, I believe it's going to be slide 20, for the 2021 NMLA required in-service training. That standard is held to all officers across the state of New Mexico. All officers have to obtain that training to maintain their certification. Our department does that at the baseline minimum, but in addition, what we also like to add is our realistic de-escalation training. We identified a need for this, and so that's what we require of our officers in addition to the minimum. Along with that was the interactions with persons with mental illness, but to go further than that, we included VR empathy training to make it as realistic as possible for the officers and also their decision making. And then from there, we also identified a need for autism awareness within our community, because we do have members that may suffer from it, and we need our officers to be able to properly identify if somebody is autistic. We would hate for an officer to perceive this as some type of high from a narcotic, and we would like them to be able to identify common words that are used. And part of the training is we show officers a common or repetitive word that people who have seek counseling for this is, I'm okay. They'll say, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And that's a cue to the officer to realize maybe this isn't a danger. Maybe this is somebody that is in need of help. Also, some of their sporadic movement of the arms, that's something called stimming. And so we need the officers to not identify that as a threat or as an attack, but them trying to calm themselves. And so we felt that that was extremely important to partner with Heart of Autism to provide that training in addition to the baseline minimum, along with the fair and impartial policing, the implicit bias training that we require of our officers. And also across the nation, you saw some issues with officers not intervening when they need to, and we take that very serious. And so with that, we included it with scenario-based training. So it's not silo type training to where I just sit in a classroom and tell you about it, but I want the officers to actively have to make decisions and do it with their equipment on and make it as realistic as possible so that we're seeing the true product on the streets as well. And last, the reality-based training or scenarios, we're trying to offer it more than just once a year, but try to bring it in the spring and in the fall and make it ever evolving, and so that we're practicing best trends and keeping our officers up to date as much as possible.
Thank you. And then I was waiting for, maybe I missed it, but I doubt it. I was waiting for a presentation or something on the kind of services that are provided for you, the officers, all of you, from the chief down to, I don't know, ACOs, maybe, I don't know if the ACOs fall in. Yeah, they are in your department, but I don't think they're commissioned officers. But but just a total inclusion of the entire LCPD insofar as training mental health for you. And I don't mean mental health like everybody needs a psychiatrist or to be on Prozac or something, but I mean in terms of keeping it together and making sure that an officer is able to confront very difficult situations. And do you have, those sorts of situations where you're going to be sure to, just keep your cool, so to speak. I don't know what other term to use. And I mean, I personally, no, I could never be a police officer. My hat's off to all of you. I'm too, hot-headed and, oh yeah, you think so? Bang. No, not really. I'm not violent, but seriously, is there any programs that you have, either that you get sent to, or do you have a psychologist, psychiatrist, social workers, anyone in the mental health field that comes and talks to you, or do you have any resources that are readily and happily available to you? Are you able to have we can't have these conversations otherwise except in an open meeting like this. So I don't mean to be intrusive, but I do care. I care. I think all of us here on City Council care very much about police officers, and really incidental to that, thank you so much for putting your lives on the line for me. And I've said to many people, yes, this, that, and the other, nothing in the world is perfect, but when something's going wrong or you're scared, seriously, are you going to call, your best friend? Well, yeah, police officer's your best friend. That's who you call. So thank you. So I don't mean to be intrusive, but I do understand the pressures of your work, of your duties. And so do you have consistent, and I see that as part of your training, quite frankly. I think that it's very difficult to find, it's been difficult to find police officers or to fill the vacancies that exist in the police department, but insofar as, just have that, just maintenance for you, tune-ups for you, take your car in every so many miles, to whatever, engine checks, battery checks, whatever. I can't find any other analogy except to make sure that you are taken care of and that you're fit for the job. Does anything like that happen?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, as a matter of fact, yes. Part of our realistic and de-escalation training, this was all held together in one day. So we did the first portion of the day until 12, and then for the later portion, we did the interactions with mental illness and empathy training. But at the end, we required our officers to speak with Dr. Pete DeVosto, our psychologist, and Bernie Maynor. And all officers had to have a conversation and a wellness check to go over any concerns that they have, any issues that they may be suffering. Another thing that our department does very well is after major incidents, we do a really good job of holding debriefs for officers that may have suffered some type of traumatic experience or event. And we do it not only for the officers, but for all involved, to include dispatchers and those that may have been called to the scene, to include fire department, EMS personnel as well. Officers do have the ability to go to our Cortico app, which is anonymous and allows them to kind of take self-test to help them if they need services, and to provide them an outlet or at least a route, along with speaking with the supervisor if they're having any type of issues.
And do you find that is being utilized? Is that monitored at all insofar as whether those those available resources and recourses are being utilized?
Mayor, Councilor Flores, yes, we've actually done a survey. I don't have the results with me right now, but we're constantly exploring the effectiveness and the need to, if we need to update the officer wellness program as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much again for your service, and thank you for answering all my questions. Thank all of you for answering all my questions, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Bencomo, did you have some questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Chief, for you and your team today. I think I have questions for all of you. Maybe I'll start with some easy ones. No, they're all easy, Chief. I'm curious about, in some of the metro narcotics reporting, you had cannabis on there. I'm just curious how that will change with the new state laws.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, the marijuana that was seized in these cases was obviously, there was some sort of law that was broken, and it involved the marijuana. That's why it was seized. Obviously, with the current law or law changes have come up, you know, those numbers are probably going to go down.
So it's just going to go away completely? And forgive my naive question, sometimes I can't believe it.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, there is still a limit that people are allowed to have.
Okay, yes.
Things of that nature. So there will still be an illegal amount of marijuana.
Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. With the case clearance, I'm curious if you will speak about, and I don't remember who that was. I have all your names on here, but I don't remember who spoke to that.
Lieutenant Bradley.
Can you speak about the department goals? Like, what are your goals in terms of case clearance? I know that you mentioned, right, that there's these differences between the national rates and our local ones, but what are our, LCPD's internal goals when it comes to some of these rates?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo. So as far as our internal goals, they vary depending on what the crime is categorized as. We view crimes very differently. Property crimes, while they're important, take kind of a backseat when you look at crimes against persons, or most importantly, crimes against children. Those are our two highest areas. Overall, though, our goal is to maintain an 85% case closure rate of all of the cases that come in per year. Right now, I just did the numbers before I came in. I forgot to grab the sheet off the printer, but we are running at 86.3% case clearance rate.
Wow.
So those would be of basically all of the cases that CID gets, or criminal investigations. Those are going to be the cases that are reviewed, and if they are solvable, are sent out to a detective or administratively closed if they're just not solvable. Most of those, unfortunately, are our property crimes. That's why property crimes is so low as far as case clearance. You have to, for these things like Chief alluded to, when you have people that just pull open a door wearing gloves in the middle of a pandemic, also wearing a mask, there's very little solvable evidence that we're going to be able to find from there. So unfortunately, property crimes are probably the highest level that are administratively closed. Crimes against persons, crimes against children are very rarely administratively closed. They're pretty much always assigned out to at least be followed up on.
Wow, that's super helpful to understand. Thank you. I appreciate it, Lieutenant.
No.
I have some questions on the internal affairs pieces. Just for my own clarity, when is our first OIR report out?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, we had a meeting with them recently, and I reminded them that they have a biannual report out. They put it on the radar, so we should be hearing from them pretty soon.
Great.
I want to say maybe December.
Great. Thank you. You had some sort of, I missed your statistic. You said something about 59% of complaints, and I was trying to type up my notes on what you were saying, and I missed it, and I was hoping you would circle back on that.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, the 59% rate that I referred to was 59% of complaints are found to be within policy. Shows that we are continuing to develop and train our officers. In other words, they're doing the right thing. Okay. 59% of them were basically either unfounded, which means the act allegedly apparently did not occur, or the complaint was found to be false or erroneous, or the employees were exonerated, meaning the employee's conduct was lawful, justified, and proper.
Thank you. That seems high to me, and I don't mean, that's obviously a good thing, right? We want to report that police officers are doing the right thing. However, if there's a number of complaints and that many are coming back, and we're saying these sort of are cleared, what's the misconnect then between the officers and the community making some of these complaints?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, some of the complaints that we receive, they're complaining on, they received a citation for speeding.
Okay.
The officer illegally gave them a speeding ticket. They just want to complain to somebody. That is between them and the judicial system. I mean, the officer, goes through training, a radar is certified, he gets a reading from his radar unit from the vehicle, assigns a speeding citation. I can't do anything else but exonerate that officer. It was lawful, proper, and justified. And they want to make a complaint because they received the ticket. Now, for example, on crashes, the officer did not cite the person for speeding. Well, number one, the officer wasn't there. He can't tell how fast the cars are going without doing an in-depth crash reconnaissance. But if it's a minor crash, the officer is not going to do a 100% complete crash reconstruction of the event, and there's no way possible that he can tell that that person was speeding. Therefore, he didn't issue a speeding citation, but the person was mad and called in a complaint or filled out a complaint form because the other party did not receive a speeding ticket.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Do you have broken down data on this 59% around what these cases look like? Like, do you have, part of those 60%, 59%, are they mostly cases like this? Do you have cases that were potentially complaints of excessive use of force? Like, where do you have that sort of data broken down?
I didn't bring that exact data with me, but from the slide that we can tell here, the internal investigations are the very first color that you will see there on the far left. And then we have the very formal complaints, the EI C1s that are there, and then C2s are just, I want to notify your supervisor. Those are rare and few between. And then the non-bona fide complaints, for example, like the last few examples I gave, are the C3s. So these are the statistics that we have broken down. These are the number of completed cases that we have. I still have some cases that are pending they're still under investigation that haven't been completed, that didn't make it to this chart because they are not completed.
Okay. So Lieutenant Gutierrez, are you saying then am I hearing you say that the more formal ones in the orangey color, that those may be more of the ones that I'm talking about, like the more excessive use of force types of complaints?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. This, I'm not gonna lie to you, your graph was the most complicated out of all the graphs. So thank you for breaking that down. I think I might have a couple more questions for you. You said that you've started to track de-escalation efforts. How long have you been doing that? And then when do you think you'll be able to provide us some data?
The drop-down box was added to the forms that the officers fill out within the last 4 to 5 weeks.
Oh, okay.
We had to do training. We had to update everybody on how to use it. And of course, there were some errors made, so we had to backtrack. So by the next quarter, I should have some good numbers for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I think those are all my questions for you, Lieutenant. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have some questions on trainings. And I'll wait for Sergeant Austin.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, on the de-escalations, our CIT team has been tracking those for a lot longer, but officially through the IA unit, we started doing it 5 or 6 weeks ago. So we'd have some data from before then, but officially we started about 5 or 6 weeks ago. Just to add a little bit more.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you for moving the slides. And I think it was actually maybe the one before where you had the 1081. Yes, okay. So you say 1081's hours provided. Is that how many hours have been completed by officers?
I cannot say, I'm sorry, Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, I cannot say that all officers have completed that because we do have laterals. And so we have some laterals. And for example, if I have one that came from New Mexico State Police, for example, they wouldn't have attended our training. Though they will make it up through in-service training and they will get the required training that we expect of them. I can't say that every officer gets that. Anybody who goes through our academy does receive that 1081.
Okay, that's super helpful to understand. I had one more question for you on this. And then, so for example, like the use of, or the impartial police training, well, any of these, right, that you have 4 hours, so then the next slide, the ones that you have 4 hours, is that for the whole year, or, and I know that you've talked about this before, you have to refresh my memory.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, That is for this year, and this
Okay.
year alone, with the addition of the interactions with mental illness and the 2 hours of autism. So altogether, that one day was about, give or take, 10 hours.
And then, so in 2022, for example, they'll have a refresher.
That's correct.
Okay. And who, are these sort of like 4 hours for some of these, are those national trends?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, I don't have an exact answer. I can tell you this realistic de-escalation training we went to was in Phoenix, and it's put on through Force Science Institute, which is kind of like the lead in law enforcement training, most up-to-date policy. Okay. That course was about 3 days, and what we try to do is condense it for the officers with the most vital material to ensure that we have adequate staffing and we can still maintain the streets and also get our officers in time.
That makes sense. So so a couple of you will go to trainings, and then it's like a train-the-trainer model, and then you come back and it's officer-led trainings?
That is correct.
Okay. Do you partner at all with any local folks? I know, like, I think you mentioned the autism. Do you ever go out to partners to help you with some of the trainings?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, autism awareness, to my knowledge, is the first one where we really started bringing them in. We kind of want to be cognizant of who we're bringing in and what their background is to the officers and embedding them. Off the cuff, I don't know of any other ones that we have brought in specifically like that. Like I mentioned before, when I talked about the domestic violence unit and La Casa, we don't have La Casa there with us actively training, but our officers are assigned, a majority of them are assigned to internal affairs, CID. And so with it, they're normally working felony level cases with them on a regular basis. And so that training we extract from them and their personal experiences and, again, the most up-to-date case law that we're experiencing.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear. And I mean, I don't know how this would work, right? I know that you've been doing this forever, but I think it's really important to bring in outside partners to train on the very expertise that they have, right? And how they sort of handle some of these very specific issues. I know that, for example, like PFLAG and EQ&M, they've done sensitive trainings on the LGBTQIA community, right? And how to relate to folks. And so that's just what came to mind, and I think it's important that you continue to reach out to some of those local partners.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Thank you, that was it for me on trainings. And then, honestly, I think that the thing that caught my eye the most are in the strategies and the forecasting. DC Brock, and even Chief Dominguez, what you mentioned about, bringing in a program to really target those, I think you said low-level street crime, right? The folks that you're like, you're not very good at this, you keep getting caught, how can we veer you towards something else? I've seen those programs in other places work really well, where there's ceasefire programs, where there's peer-to-peer mentoring even, where folks are being like, look, we've caught you, like you have an opportunity to really change gears here, right? And so I'm really curious to hear more about that, Chief, and how you're bringing those programs and how you're thinking about bringing those programs.
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, like I stated earlier, there's already a couple of programs that we know that are working here in the state, as well as in the Phoenix area, which has the large drug issue. Their programs are already set, so we're actually sending some people to these jurisdictions to get a little bit more on the program and tailor it to our community. As I stated earlier, I'll plagiarize any good program if I can find it and implement it here.
Absolutely. I don't think we have to reinvent any wheels. I think nationally, probably these trends look very similar, right? So what have other cities done that have worked for them? Yeah, I fully support your plagiarizing. And so, Lieutenant, I am so sorry, DC Brock, I would like to understand the data in a deeper way. And so I don't know if that's where the forecasting comes in, but I would like to understand the patterns in the data. I would like to understand so much of what Lieutenant Witila was saying around, the problems that we're seeing throughout a lot of the individuals that she's coming in contact with and the advocates. To me, those don't seem like individual problems. These seem like systemic problems. And I would like to have a deeper understanding, and I don't know when, Mayor Nifo and all of you, when we can do that, because I would like to understand how us as policymakers and the community at large can support your efforts. And in targeting some of these hotspots, if you will. But I didn't see that today, right? Like, when are we able to see some of that information? Where are there high crime communities and neighborhoods in the city? And how can we better organize resources?
Mayor, Councilor Bencomo, to your point, we do a lot of forecasting in certain areas, and we do know or realize that there's a larger amount of domestics, for example, in a certain district, in a certain area, or we call them beats, that garner a lot of attention from law enforcement. That's kind of where we're going with this community advocate program, so we can put them and have them go do the door-to-door work with council members and other organizations throughout the city without having to have police input. That's kind of what we're going with this community advocate program. To your point, there's a lot of juvenile crime, domestics, a lot of burglaries, things of that nature in certain areas that we recognize that the root cause has a lot to do with poverty and things of that nature. So that's what we're working on. Also, Mr. Peely is also working with us through all the departments with the city to target certain areas with that in mind.
Absolutely. I really believe that it is not the sole responsibility of LCPD to ensure we have safer, healthier communities, right, through crime prevention. That should not be your only responsibility, and that's unfair. And so I think so I'm glad that, you're bringing this all to us, and I would absolutely love to work with Lieutenant Whittela on this. Very interested about this community advocate program, because the research shows us over and over, right, that communities and neighborhoods with higher poverty rates may experience and probably do experience higher crime rates as well. And these communities are also where people live that have little access to social services, to education, to healthcare, and we can't out-police ourselves out of these challenges, right? We have to include a community empowerment model where our communities are having buy-in in the way that we're addressing some of these issues. And for me, it's really important that all that information, all that data, even if it's just stories that you're hearing, get to the policymakers, because I want to better, like I said, organize the resources and how we're, whether it's the JCEP program, whether it's creating another recreational center, youth mentoring programs, whatever it might be, and I think it's maybe all of those are solutions. I just think we have to do a better job at communicating with each other what those solutions might be. But that's all I want. I'll get off my high horse now, Chief. It was important for me to make that statement, because I just feel like we have to break cycles of disinvestment in certain neighborhoods, in certain areas, rebuild trust, and I can see that you're doing that through LCPD Cares. But I would like to have that space, Mayor and EFO, where we drill down on some of these community-based strategies, so that the chief doesn't think he's plagiarizing solutions, because he's not. Those are important evidence-based solutions that we can all have time to talk about, discuss, and then implement. Thank you.
So, Councilor, if you would, either drop me an email or at our next council meeting during your council comments, let's dive into a little bit more, and then we'll take a look at and then see when we can set something up.
Mayor,
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
yeah, thank you, Councilor Bencomo, for your questions and comments. I do want to say that Ifo and I have been talking a lot about this, and I've plagiarized or followed your lead related to the distress indexing, and you did a lot of research and looking. As you know, I've had several public safety meetings, trying to understand what the public, right, is seeing, their perception, and it's vast, right? It's from defunding police, don't be doing that. Our law enforcement officers need to have better pay, which all of that is in my estimate true. We're not defunding police. In fact, you're the department that has probably the highest budget of all of the departments in this community, in this city. But I've asked that we use that distress indexing, look at the zip codes, use a GIS mapping tool, right, to couple that with the crime, and then look at the zip codes that have the highest level, right, of poverty and crime and unemployment, the average income, all those things. I address those by infusing resources, not only what the city has, but what our nonprofits have, just sort of redistributing if need be, right? So I know EFO's working with all the departments. I'm working on, that portion with Resilience Leaders, the group that I have founded, and there's a lot of movement in that area in regards to ensuring that people have the survival and thriving services, right? And so I know that EFO, I think you're ready to come soon to us with all that data and identifying where the zip codes with the most right need is, and then coming up with solutions and strategies moving forward, I think. But I want to say that, but I also want to encourage you, Chief, and departments to there's so many evidence-based programming out there that shows, right, if you do this particular program or project, you're going to get some great results. And it's good to not reinvent the wheel, right, to look at other partners. There's some fantastic programs out there. And the other thing that I'm just concerned about is, and I agree with Councilor Bencomo, the expertise. There's so many experts out in our community that work very specifically with, like, for example, domestic violence, which I know is a good part of the cases that you're receiving, and how we're identifying those cases and linking and referring to those resources. I just feel that in our community today, there's so many people that are trying to address conflict with violence. And kids are seeing that unfortunately in their home life, and we need to intervene earlier. And so partnering with the schools and other entities, and again, I've reached out to La Casa over the weekend, and they're interested in EFO partnering with us to put a conference together. And then being able to educate you all, Lcpd and the staff, being able to identify the red flags, right, and then addressing them accordingly. So I appreciate this. I think what would be helpful, and I know that's coming, EFO is just giving us a time frame about where we're at with that, and when can we expect that kind of level of data. Thank you, Mayor.
Is that okay?
Yes, Ivo.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I appreciate that. This is a pretty exciting project for our whole staff. I think everybody that's been involved in our initial meeting have all expressed excitement and willingness to participate. And one of the reasons why it's not included as a part of this is, as you mentioned, Councilor Bencomo, this isn't just police. This is police they have a seat at that table, but it's a community-wide issue, and it's a staff-wide issue. And it's exciting because it's something that we're all moving together in solidarity with, and what a focus for a city to have. And so our next meeting is tomorrow. So we have we were calling it our neighborhood coordination meeting for now. I'm sure we'll find a more exciting thing to call it as we get the data. But from our first meeting, the action item was really to have GIS come back with the map, overlaying the poverty index with the crime index. And again, appreciate all the input and feedback. Talking to all the counselors that have given us feedback, staff, and of course, PD. And so we're kind of overlaying, putting everything together here. That's the next step, is to have this map. So with this map, we'll identify those areas. And I'm sure many, just anecdotally, or even Chief could take me to a neighborhood right now without a map in front of it. But when we overlay the poverty index as well as the crime data, we're hoping to see some more refined, even getting down to something more specific than the zip codes, if we can, but identifying a couple of neighborhoods. And then, of course, this was mentioned by the council as well, using the pavement management index and everything, capital outlay, maintenance budgets. It's all going to be included in our plan of attack here. But that's what we'll bring next, will be the areas that we've identified based on that index, based on the map. And then some strategies that we've come up with as this committee we formed internally. Probably, not coming with the presentation, but after that we'll come to council and we're all kind of working together to provide something. But this is very, very exciting, and I think we will. I think it will make a difference. I think it will impact. If anything, it unifies us in one cause as a city. And sorry, I talked a lot, but didn't give you a timeline. Like I said, tomorrow we'll have that meeting, and so we should have that map in a presentable form right after that meeting. So I can either send that out to council or even have a work session at the next work session that's coming.
That would be great. I think a work session, Mayor, would be a really good way of presenting that data and then working together for next steps. And I just wanted to remind folks my November 16th meeting at 6 for public safety at the Home Builders Association. I think a number of us I will be there, and I believe Chief and some of your staff will be there if you haven't been invited already. I'm looking at Jamie, she's shaking her head that you've been invited. So it'll be another opportunity to meet with community related to public safety. I'll be sharing some data, incorporating some of the things that we talked about here today, and some solutions moving forward.
Very good. Hey, Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. Thank you to all our officers as well for all your hard work and for your reports today. Especially excited to see the LCPD CARES program growing and expanding out to different communities. It's really exciting to see the work there. I do have just some very specific questions, and I want to thank my colleagues for all the great questions that they asked. There was a lot covered here today. The first one is just around the burglaries. I know that I think you said nationally and locally the rates to actually solve those are about 14%. Is that right? Which is it's fairly low, but I know that that's looking at the national standard here that we're right along those lines. But a source of frustration with constituents, I think, seems to be around that lack of being able to solve some of these crimes. And I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on why some of those crimes are so hard to solve, and perhaps what we would be able to tell residents, especially with the advent of new cameras and that kind of thing that folks can put. What are some best practices to make sure we're keeping folks safe from burglary?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, Lieutenant Bradley spoke about solvability factors specifically to burglaries. When we have somebody that's wearing a mask in pitch dark, wearing gloves, and they get into a vehicle that's open and grab a laptop that's sitting there and just walk away with it, the solvability factors there are, unless somebody saw something right next door or something, it's going to be very difficult for us to solve that type of crime. We put out several PIO announcements throughout the year on how to keep from being a victim or becoming a victim. Keep your doors locked, take things out of your vehicle. Don't park in lit areas. If you don't have lighting around your home, get some. That kind of thing really helps us out in being able to get some solvability factors. Again, surveillance, cameras, things of that nature are a huge help with solving some of these crimes. But as you can see, there's a lot to overcome when it comes to property crime, specifically auto burglaries, which are extremely difficult to find any type of solvability factors. Lieutenant Bradley, if you'd like to expound on that. He runs our CIS section and is constantly having operation meetings with the property detectives.
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, like the chief was saying, solvability factors are a huge issue. The sheer volume of the crimes also weigh into it. Of my property and financial detectives, they make up about 30% of my unit, and each one of them has a caseload of well over 100 cases those are workable cases. Those aren't just what we've received. and looked at. But like the chief was saying, we view everything for solvability factors. Another issue that we run into, unfortunately quite frequently, is we provide a link to homeowners to upload their video directly to us. So we don't have to wait for getting somebody available or getting a thumb drive. We can do it on scene. Unfortunately, there's several instances where the homeowners just don't follow up. They don't follow through with these things. Another huge issue that we run into is cases that are being reported, 2, 3, 4 weeks after they occurred. It makes it extremely difficult to follow up on anything or find any kind of evidence of merit 3 weeks after those courts have occurred.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And just seeing the trends in burglary and auto theft and felony larceny go up, I think getting that information out in a way that that is both timely but also responsive, I think, to the trends that we're seeing is appreciated as much as we can continue to do that to make sure that folks are engaging in those best practices. Another question related to that is, have we seen an increase in particular with the property crimes of juveniles committing those crimes here in Las Cruces?
So to the specific, Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, I can't speak to the specifics of the offenders. Auto burglaries tend to always, or not always, but auto burglaries tend to have a lot of juvenile offenders just because it's a simple task to have. It's very simple to commit these crimes. You go, you pull a door, you throw a brick through the window and pull whatever you want out. So as far as an increase, I would say as of right now, it's been pretty much a constant. These tend to be, generally speaking, your teenage offenders into your early 20s that are continually just going into cars, things like that. As far as catalytic converter thefts, things, the felony larcenies that you alluded to, most of those offenders that have been identified have all been adults that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And the other question here is around the expectations when the department is fully staffed. Assuming that we have 30 new cadets make it into past training and become police officers, what is your expectation with a fully staffed department in terms of the overall performance of your department and things that perhaps you will improve on and have more capacity for? What kind of things would you prioritize, Chief?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, I'm glad you brought that up. We're hoping, and I'm knocking on any type of wood substance that I can find, to get fully staffed, because that allows us to be proactive. Right now, we are largely reactionary. We're doing some proactive things through community outreach, but we've been stymied because of our staffing levels. As soon as we get staffed, we'll be able to deploy a full street crimes unit, for example, get a lot more of our officers involved in these projects with community partnerships. Our officers are assigned to districts, and they take an ownership in the district, but when they're call-driven right now, so it's kind of hard for them to do follow-ups, things of that nature. Your area, your district that you're in charge of, you know the areas that we'd love to have officers in there all the time on bikes, things of that nature, making that connection with the community. That right now we've had an issue getting officers out on a bike. You get out, 3 blocks away from your car, and you're going to get a call, and you got to get back in your car and get back on there. So to answer your question, our expectation is once we get fully staffed, we will be a more proactive department.
So I'm glad to hear that, Chief. Thank you. And the other question I have here, and this is maybe more of a philosophical question, I'm sure if you can answer it or not, but the recidivism rate in Doña Ana County is one of the highest, I think, and really in New Mexico. So folks that are re-entering the criminal justice system after going through, being in county jail or whatever type of criminal justice experience they have, seems to be, causing a lot of repeat offenders, right? Folks who are repeatedly in and out of jail. What can you say in terms of the trend of who you see kind of committing some of these crimes, whether they're violent crimes? Do you tend to see that a lot of them are from folks that have been in and out of the criminal justice system?
Mayor, Councilor Vasquez, yes. I don't have that statistic right now, but when we last reported out in May, we had 258, I believe, arrests for felonies at the time. 14% of those arrests were rearrested on a different felony. So we do see a lot of the same customers, if you will, based off of the judicial system and things of that nature, the way it works. There definitely has to be some programs to get people out of the business.
Thank you, Chief. And that was going to lead me to my next comment about the type of community investment we can make that is impactful and effective. And I think that rehabilitation, getting folks jobs and getting them back on their feet, after they've entered the criminal justice system is just as important, I think, as some of the other solutions we've talked about. So thank you for that. I think those are all my questions, Chief. I know we've spent quite a bit on this conversation, but again, I want to thank you, and hopefully we get you the resources you need soon to be fully staffed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Sorg.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank Chief, you and all of your officers here for this report. It's quite good. Our colleagues here have asked a lot of good questions and everything that I can possibly think of, except one thing. I have a question about a term you just used called street crime. I don't know if you could hear me well. Street crime. Could you define what you mean by street crime so I understand?
So, Mayor, Councilor Slorg, we have a unit called the Street Crimes Unit. Street crimes speak to levels of crime that are in the street, violent crime, aggravated assaults, burglaries that are violent in nature, robberies, things of that nature. That's what we call street crime.
Okay, thank you. That helps. I get a lot of calls about nonviolent crime that's going on in a person's neighborhood. These aren't, obviously they're not your highest priority for sure, but I was wondering if you get an overwhelming number of those kinds of calls for service.
Mayor, Councilor Sorg, unfortunately, yes. Especially in your district, we get a lot of these crews that I was talking about bouncing around. They'll hit a couple of dark streets in your district and give us 20 burglaries to investigate the next day.
Okay, and so because of that, because of your shortage of officers and all, I understand you're not going to be able to go to. I mean, these are not burglaries either. These are more of nuisance crimes, I think, nuisance calls. I'm not using the right term there, maybe, but they're not high priorities for sure. So anyway. I just wanted to point that out. And by the way, I just want to give a shout out to your new traffic lieutenant officer. He was in a meeting with us last week, and I was quite impressed with what they were telling us. Yes. So just hello to them. Thank you.
He's right here. His name is Sergeant or Lieutenant Sean Mullen. I'll introduce him. He didn't have he's been in his new position all the 2 weeks, so I don't want to put him on put his feet to the fire. But he has been attending a lot of meetings.
Yeah, he was good. He was very good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so I have just a couple. Chief, thank you very much for that presentation. Each and every one of you was excellent. Regarding the auto burglaries, I know 382 sounds high. Albuquerque, I was just there this weekend, and I was just hoping that my vehicle didn't get stolen. Of course, I have a few things on there, but I mean, I think they're up to 4,000 so far year to date. Right. But the VIN etching, how effective is that, in your opinion? And would you encourage, if they can get that, to have that done?
Mayor, the VIN etching is, as far as recoveries, it's huge. It works a lot for us because once they get stolen vehicles, a lot of them try to manipulate the VIN. And when it's VIN etched, we're able to go and find it where it was secretly placed on the glass. I noticed, or I referenced the 66% recovery rate. Several of those have been recovered due to the etching.
Okay, good. The second is, and I like that idea about the business decals. I know the lieutenant was talking about that. And so if we can get some more information on that, I can try to put it on social media of mine. And I'm sure, I don't know if I've seen that on the city's, maybe on your all's website, but the city's website as well. But I wanted to know if there was a way to encourage, or if there was businesses who wanted to have a certain type of equipment or cameras that are compatible with yours, it makes it a little bit easier. So, you know, in addition to that decal, maybe if there's any particular type of cameras a business should purchase that is more compatible with, say, yours as opposed to, you know, because I'm sure there's all kinds on the market. But if there are some that, you know, maybe you provide 2 or 3 different ones that might be good, that work well with your department, that might even go a little bit further, or it doesn't really matter.
Mayor, there are cameras out there that are a little bit more compatible. I don't want to, you know, put it out there because then other cameras that aren't set, camera systems might have an issue with that. But there are camera systems that do work a little bit better with the items that we deploy.
Okay, good. Well, that was all I had. It's good to see a couple of your men, the Sergeant Austin and Lieutenant Bradley. Their fathers had distinguished careers with the department, and so it's good to see them following in their footsteps. So thank you very much, and thank you for all that you all do.
And legacies for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, very good. So next we're going to go to item 3.2, the Neighborhood Leadership Academy update. Jamie Rickman.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. My name is Jamie Rickman, for the record. I'd like to also introduce my colleague, Carla Walton. We both comprise the Community Engagement Office in the City Manager's Office. So I'll be brief as I can, and that way we can move along with this. So this is to just provide an update to you regarding the Neighborhood Leadership Academy. It seems to me like it's been a very long time ago since we've heard anything about it. And we can thank the pandemic for that, for sure. And just as a refresher, let me get to the next slide. So the mission, as a reminder for everybody, also in the audience too, the mission of the City of Las Cruces Neighborhood Leadership Academy is to provide improved knowledge of city government to residents so they can become effective neighborhood advocates and community leaders. This was always important. I printed this on the agendas for the classes that we had, so it was a constant reminder for folks. And then as an objective summary, you can see that, but the objectives were to provide an understanding and knowledge of city services and processes, promote civic engagement in residents' roles in decision-making processes, increase residents' pride in their community and understanding of how government works for them, and to develop neighborhood and community leaders. So a lot of what we talk about every day in work sessions or council meetings or what have you kind of interweaves with Neighborhood Leadership Academy and its concepts and its mission and its objectives. So just to kind of remind folks too, with the organization that we had with Neighborhood Leadership Academy, I had it divided in what I call semesters, if you can compare that to what NMSU provides, with weekly in-person classes that were 3 hours or more in length per class. And we usually had that on Wednesday nights to avoid Tuesday and Thursday nights for your district meetings. So we had full weeks sometimes. The NLA also had pre-semester survey, which asked for demographics and interest areas, mid-semester surveys, post-semester surveys, presenter assessment surveys after each class, post-semester facility survey, and we requested also free-form input sent by email from the participants. So you can see we had a lot of data, and by gathering this data, it provided us some benchmark information for us. So the surveys and assessments allowed us to make adjustments throughout the semester to better target needs and interests and to provide timely feedback to presenters, as well as information to upcoming presenters to avoid certain things or to emphasize certain things in their presentation. So this was all real-time feedback that we would be swift enough to be able to make those adjustments as time permitted through the upcoming days. So the program culminated in City Council recognition, as you may remember, for some of the graduates, and a formal graduation ceremony. Both of those had certificates. The process resulted in creating a comfort level to access personnel for queries or projects and open the door for participation in city projects. for the future for the participants. And then if you could indulge me for a moment, if you don't mind, I want to give very special thanks and credit to city personnel who participated in these classes. It is because of their willingness to participate, making a brilliant effort, and positively interacting with community members attending these classes that make this program successful, and I just really wanted to emphasize that tonight. They have an innate ability toward continuous improvement, which means delivering their information in always a professional manner, but still being very engaging. And for this, I am eternally grateful to all of them for their participation. So next, I'm going to provide some quick statistics, again, as part of this background. So I lay out the following information to provide that context for the program adjustments that we are doing so you can see where we were and where we're going. So the frequency of the program was that it started in the fall of 2017, followed by 2 semesters in 2018. We adjusted the program to once per year for a spring semester in 2019 and 2020. The adjustment was due to issues of lighting in the fall semester and personnel fatigue. We also had a dip in signups at the 3rd semester, which was in the fall. And all of this factored into the change to make it just offered once a year. And then, of course, the spring of 2020 semester was cut short in mid-March due to the pandemic. That was just last year, but it sure seems like it was a long time ago at this point. So with regard to the next bullet point is demographics. We asked city councilors to encourage constituents to apply to the Neighborhood Leadership Academy, and thank you very much. You did a great job. Sometimes it got a little competitive. So the number of attendees to date, we have 130 attendees. And I say attendees rather than graduates because of that last semester when we had to cut the semester short. So I'm counting that last semester of 2020 in that count. And then over the course of the 5 semesters we had, and these are percentages from your districts of that 130 total. So for District 1, there were 11% represented. District 2, 13%. District 3, 13%. District 4, 15%. District 5, 29%. And District 6, 19%. And I'll just kind of give you some highlights on some of these other statistics so we don't get bogged down in the numbers. So the largest age groups were 55 to 64. That was our first group. 65 to 74 was the second highest group. 45 to 54, and so on and so forth. And then our lowest attending group was 18 to 24. So the reason I'm bringing up these statistics is because it's important to be able to focus on those lower statistics so we can do a better job at recruiting and making sure that everybody gets some exposure to Neighborhood Leadership Academy. And then we asked them to self-identify their ethnicity. And the 2 top categories, of course, are Caucasian at 34.6% and Hispanic Latino at 26%. And then 4.6% decided not to self-identify at all. So that was fine. And then we have several other categories, very small percentages. Their employment statuses I found very interesting. 36.9% of all attendees were employed. So that means that they carved out this time, 3.5+ hours out of their work week to attend and be dedicated to learn from the Neighborhood Leadership Academy. 23.8% were retired. That was the second biggest group. 13.8% were self-employed, and then other categories made up 5%. And then finally, the percent education levels, overwhelmingly, everyone had a high school diploma, some college credit, or were degreed, almost 94% of the total. So now what we have here are featured topics. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail because of the time, but just to give you an idea how we selected topics to begin with for the start of the program, through the evolution of the program, and then as we move forward. So for broad topic areas, these were selected based on the frequency of interest from constituent complaints or reports or queries that came in, and for areas identified in need of awareness. In other words, we assume that there were some certain areas that people needed to be educated about and made aware about. And so I worked with department representatives, our presenters, and asked them to touch on certain points of interest to highlight in the presentations based on their experience with the public as well. Within those topics, the subjects were refined, again, based on constituent complaints or queries, what people needed to know about, and for later semesters, the feedback from the actual participants too. And so for general purposes, we had an introduction, budget basics, capital improvement program, public safety, utilities, community development, public works, economic development, quality of life programs, parks and recreation, city attorney's office, city clerk's office, codes, animal control, neighborhood watch, fleet, streets, traffic engineering, transit, and NPO, and our joint powers agreement partners. And for those partners, we brought in the partners, the representatives of those partnerships, and they were able to talk about their respective areas. And then always a part of the Neighborhood Leadership Academy was hosting the classes at city facilities to provide tours and quality experiences. And it was important for the facilities tours because some of the attendees might not normally have an opportunity to see the facilities, and so it was a great opportunity to be able to show them. So the evolution of content occurred based on the feedback and then arced from providing department overviews to delving deeper into topics and providing hands-on activities. One of those hands-on activities were our signature tabletop exercises that folks really appreciated, and that came mostly from Parks and Recreation and from Transit. And I'll go into that in a little bit later. So let's see. So further refinement of content also occurred with other input opportunities, such as asking the participants certain questions. The responses for those questions were compiled and then shared with administration. And we did that as a way to be able to help the departments make improvements in communication and focus on certain topics that were of interest rather than just kind of, seeing what's going to stick to the wall and just making sure that it was quality information that we were giving out. So some of the things, and this was kind of tough to take in some cases, because I told the participants, be brutally honest with us, let us know what we need to do. So I asked them, what are the top 3 things you like about the city? What are the top things you dislike about the city? What do you plan to do with the information you've learned so far in the academy? And how can we help in your plans to share that information or to whatever your intent is with that information, how can we help you? And then what additional resources are helpful? And then what sort of follow-up would you like to have from the city to help you as a leader in your neighborhood or community? And then also soliciting what their top 3 questions were for each topic, say like for codes or animal control or subtopic that was presented, just basically anything. And then further, with Neighborhood Leadership Academy, it didn't stop with just the class or with that semester. We also invited them back to take surveys, to participate in city projects, to be focus groups, that sort of thing. And so they really appreciated that, and we appreciated having their input, definitely. So, and I've noticed too that some alum also serve on boards and committees, which is great. And then most are just better informed and know where to find out more information and then use our office as their resource to finding more information. So why are changes needed to the Neighborhood Leadership Program? Well, the biggest thing was the impact from COVID-19. It put a stop to everything in that personal interaction. And the positive thing, I guess if you can have a positive thing with the pandemic, that's why I hesitate, is that it gave us pause to figure out how can we approach this information in a better way to make it more accessible for people, but keep everybody safe as well. And so it provided new ways of giving access to certain detail and information. It enables more convenient ways to interact, but we also had to be aware of that lack of connection. So we had to preserve that in some way and help people to make those connections and those networking opportunities. So Zoom didn't really exist before the pandemic, but now we know its capabilities, and now we can complement what we need to do and create a hybrid situation where we have resiliency, that if we have some sort of emergency or weird thing happen again in the future, we can deal with it, and we're more nimble to deal with it because we've had this year to be able to think and be able to provide better experiences. So the other piece of this is that more general information is easily available rather than, trying to have a lecture type environment and speaking at people. So the descriptive information on departments, programs, and services should be readily available and generally accessible, not only to Neighborhood Leadership Academy, but to everybody, right? And so we're creating that platform to be able to share that generalized information in a fast, easy way for people. And then we have interactive information that needs to delve deeper and be more meaningful to community members. That's where we get deeper into those questions and a deeper understanding for people to know how the city actually works and why. That's the big question, right, is the why does the city do certain things it does? And then the information, of course, should always be digestible, easy to communicate, easy to understand. So that's what we focus on. And then more specific information is tailored to participant interests. So that means facility access, tours, and experiences. What I mean by that is that maybe somebody is not so interested in, and I apologize to the respective departments and sections for saying this, but maybe someone's not so interested in going to the streets department, but they want to do something else. They want to see canines instead. So we have a way to be able to tailor this experience for them so they're not trapped in 3.5 hours of something that they're not really that interested in. We are also providing, this specific information provides hands-on widening perspectives and making connections, like I said, that networking. More focus on engagement aspects for the information, that's another focus. 3 categories of people's interest really rest in curiosity, a particular focus or interest, whatever their agenda is, and then how to use the information that they learn. So those are things that you have different levels of how people want to be involved, and so you have to accommodate that involvement. So in Forging the Future, this is what is different. What's the same and what's new with the Neighborhood Leadership Academy? What's the same is input, input, input in the form of participant surveys, dialogue, and interactions. Then we continue to have strong and continuously improved content, and then positive and meaningful experiences. You'll notice I keep mentioning these experiences because that's what makes information stick for people and just gets them engaged with the organization. So what's new, we've added 5 classes, which I now call modules because it's more descriptive, I think, than just a class per semester. So this expands from 15 classes to 20 classes. And then in summary, basically it separates fire from police, which we had lumped together before. It adds an extra class to parks and recreation, utilities, and adds another neighborhood involvement module. So in other words, that neighborhood involvement module might represent projects that they can suggest, or it can be, how do you apply this information to what you want to accomplish in your neighborhood? Oops, sorry, I knew I was going to do that. So we've also added back an extra semester. So instead of 1 semester, it's 2 semesters because the ability to provide virtual experience or virtual interaction makes it irrelevant that the time has changed, right? And that it's dark outside and you can't really take tours if the facilities are outdoors. So it helps us with that. And they just have more flexibility to see what they need to through this other way that we have planned. So it also provides a more robust learning materials using multimedia, which we haven't had before. More flexibility in attending. So we are anticipating that the new format will provide better scheduling for both NLA participants and presenters. It's more inclusive, anticipating that the new format will allow people with mobility issues, either physically or lacking transportation, to participate easier. Those are 2 main things that were a problem in the previous semesters, is that some people didn't have vehicles, consistent vehicles, or they had trouble getting around, and it was just very, very tough on them. And then again, improved experiences, smaller groups, and even one-on-one contact between participants and subject matter experts will improve their actual experience for everybody. So with that, so what we have, these are the components. So most modules will have the components listed here, but not every module will have videos or podcasts initially. As assets get developed, they will be plugged in. So you have watch, listen, read, and act. And the watch part is having videos and presentations to support the information that's developed. Listen will be providing podcasts of different topics, such as the importance of civic engagement, or maybe it's a chat with the police chief about crime and community policing. You know, it could be all kinds of different topics. Read. This is where all that generalized information is that it's, instead of the physical notebook that we had, it's online. People can print it out if they want to or use it however they need to. Also in that printed material will be support things like flyers or how-tos and things like that that they can use for the neighborhoods. Then act, and this is the most crucial part because you have discussion, input, tailored activities, and using the information. And that's the key thing, is that we want people to use the information. So the new format allows us to use tools as appropriate. For example, we may need to continue to use Zoom for discussions. These discussions are time for NLA participants to ask questions about the material that they've seen, heard, or read. The activities will be arranged in an a la carte feature or will entail our signature tabletop experience exercises. Finally, one of the most important features is how do and will NLA participants use the information they have learned. Again, we go back to those 3 categories from slide 4. They're in it either for curiosity, they have an agenda, or they want to know how to use that information. And finally, always as part of the successful program is the feedback of various forms. So to give you a small taste of something that would be included, please indulge me in showing you this. Hopefully it'll work. Yay.
The City of Las Cruces is making it easier for residents to report problems to make our community a better place. 311 Ask Las Cruces is your portal to get things done. Visit las-cruces.org and click on Report an Issue. Need to report a pothole? 311. Need to report graffiti? 311. Is your street light not working? 311. Choose 311 Ask Las Cruces and get things done.
So that's courtesy of Ms. Walton. Thank you very much. This PSA or public service announcement can be adapted not only for NLA, but to the digital newsletter program that we've adopted in general public consumption and also promoted in Spanish, so it can easily be bilingual. So carrying the concept further, we're developing a how-to video for the 311 for the public, and then future releases will also feature the 311 app so that we have. So what are the next steps for programming? So you may have heard me mention earlier a la carte, and this has absolutely nothing to do with food, so I apologize. We have been offering through NLA what I call the 101 level, and that's the basic getting to know you information. And then we have the ability to expand and delve more deeply into particular areas in what I call the 201 level of information. This little conceptual matrix that you see, don't worry about being able to read what's in there. This is what we can focus on. In the past NLA classes, individuals expressed an interest in knowing more about utilities, regulatory compliance, and this is true. They wanted to focus on that, which is something maybe not everyone would have an interest in doing, right? So any graduate of NLA 101 who wants to pursue this can sign up for that particular topic. And they sign up with the subject matter expert. They spend time with that person at a pre-agreed to time, and they can spend 4 hours, an hour, whatever length of time they agree with the subject matter expert to learn more about that particular subject. So whoever has an interest in watching canine demonstrations, as I mentioned earlier, could sign up for that as well. The whole point of a la carte is to provide flexibility for NLA attendees and city personnel, allowing them to be involved in a more meaningful manner than just a few minutes during a nighttime of a 3.5-hour class. So I think it brings a lot better quality to the program. In this process, we have to ensure that everyone who wants to can participate. If they have a bad internet connection at home or no computer, can they still participate? Absolutely. There are public computers they can use, or we can make other arrangements for them to access materials and participate in those activities. So NLA also has the ability to not only provide information to the adult community members, but to youth as well, to include middle school and high school kids. COVID severely impacted the youth component that we were planning, but as we recover from the pandemic, so will these efforts in coordination with the public schools. I personally have a soft spot in my heart for middle schoolers because they always have trouble with transitions. And so I really want to have an ability to incorporate them into this program as well. And in my discussions with public schools, they're just all for it. They're very interested in it. They want to go for it. My heart goes out to them too because they've had a horrible time with all of this. So it's just, we were planning to get together, I think in the spring, later in the spring, to be able to work out a curriculum that works for the kids and the schedules and all the logistics that go with that. So we'll be able to help that. So if somewhere along the way we can help these students, all these students, find an interest through meaningful civic engagement in their lives, it's well worth the investment. It's well worth the time and effort. So that's exciting to me. So the next added components, and again, we're almost at the end here. I'm looking at how to include shadow and mentoring opportunities for both adults and for youth. And oftentimes it's easy to kind of think of what those mentoring opportunities might be for youth, but for adults it's a little more challenging because of the logistics and, you know, who knows. It's going to be something that we're exploring at the moment. We're also looking at the formal status options for NLA graduates that might be along the lines of ambassadors for the city, facilitators for neighborhood efforts, or other options which they may have an interest. Earlier in the presentation for police, City Manager Peely talked about the mapping. And so I see an application to be able to develop neighborhood groups through that mapping project that really intertwines with all of the other departments that are involved with that project as well. So that's another exciting component of it and how everything kind of fits together. All this works toward growing an active and productive neighborhood group and identification for these groups. And as you have noticed from slide 7 and this slide, the asterisk information is Elevate Las Cruces. All these things are related in some way to the goals of Elevate Las Cruces in the city strategic plan. So that's really a helpful guide for us to keep on track and to keep synthesized with all the other departments and their goals. So finally, we're also looking at providing template services to other municipalities in the state. This is the direction that City Manager Peely wants us to head, and we've already been working towards that end with recent collaborative projects such as Census 2020 and also current Doñana broadband survey effort. What that means, template services is here's kind of a guide or an outline that other municipalities can use to provide information about their city services and programs, and it's already pre-made for them, and they can just pop in their own personal information and provide that to their communities. And lastly, I'd like to just share with you some testimonials. So it always makes me feel really good to read these. So since the class started, I recommended a few people I know to look into signing up for the class when it starts again in the future. I believe that this is a great opportunity for residents of Las Cruces to get to know the people that make Las Cruces a very successful community and city. And then the NLA gives the average Las Cruces resident the chance to peek behind the curtain and witness for themselves the inner workings of one of the best places to live in America. And then with that, I will stand for questions and discussion. And as you notice, this is all the photos that were in the presentation were from various scenes of Neighborhood Leadership Academy.
All right, thank you very much, Jamie. That was an excellent presentation as usual.
Thank you.
To Councilor Flores and Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Jamie, for your presentation. I was happy to see Luis Guerrero's name there as one of your graduates.
Mm-hmm.
He's now serving as one of our planning and zoning commissioners. So there
right.
you have it.
Mm-hmm.
And another graduate, well, no, I'll just share that with you later. It'll sound too, but another, let's put it this way, another graduate is pursuing a role in local government.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent.
So thank you so much, Jamie, and based on our conversations, you had a lot to do with that. And I'm sure that you touched, I met some of the students at the graduations, the ceremonies that we held, and they've made wonderful contributions. And thank you for yours.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Bencomo and then Councilor Sword.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you so much, Jamie and Carla, for all the work that you do. It's been really incredible working with you both on all you do for our constituents. Yes, I have a couple questions. Jamie, I wonder if you all took any specific feedback from the 18 to 24 group range around what could help bring more younger people through this program.
Not yet. Excuse me, Mayor and Councilor Bencomo, Jamie Rickman for the record, not yet. But that's on our list to be able to do, to tap into those age groups and those other demographics to say, what would interest you?
Yeah.
What makes it easy for you to attend? What would you like to see? You know, just how the nuts and bolts of what'll work for them.
Yeah.
And I think we've got enough flexibility and nimbleness now to be able to offer a lot of opportunities for people in the community, regardless of what demographic they fit in.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. That a la carte part, I think, is excellent. That's amazing. Thanks, Jamie. Yes, I'm glad you said that next up on that incredible 311 commercial is the app. I always tell people to use the app. I always tell them the response there is incredibly quick. And so, yes, I think the more you can push the app, the more you'll hit at that younger demographic as well. And then one thing I was going to suggest, Jamie, as well is for the younger folks that you're thinking about, there's some Enlace teachers throughout LCPS and even the charter schools like Las Montañas. And I name them because they're folks that are really interested in things like this and how government works and how they affect their students. And I always get invited to their classes, and so I'd be happy to give you some of those names because there are definitely teachers who are very passionate and interested about this that I think you can connect with to begin forming those classes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then the last thing I was gonna say, just giving our previous conversation with LCPD and Lieutenant Whittela around their community advocates initiative, how have you talked to her about somehow aligning both of these? And if you haven't, I think that could be a great opportunity.
Absolutely. We haven't had those discussions yet because we're still kind of digging out of all of this other COVID stuff, but definitely she's on my list for sure.
Great.
And as well as other youth-oriented programs that the city does offer, because I would like to see an interconnection that happens with all of our programs and have a thread that goes through each of those that goes back to civic engagement, not just Neighborhood Leadership Academy, but just everything that people can or youth can participate in through civic engagement.
Absolutely, and for historically disenfranchised neighborhoods, especially understanding how the city works and how they can advocate for services to their neighborhoods, I think like really targeting those populations, I think would, do great things for all of us. So thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. One thing, Mr. Mayor, if I may add, is that when I mentioned facilitators to neighborhood groups, what I'd like to do, and I've talked to Scott Rogers about this, is create a volunteer component where NLA graduates can go through that component and then help us facilitate meetings to neighborhood groups. Maybe they're loose groups for right now, just groups of people, but then help them facilitate that discussion to create actual community groups and neighborhood groups. And so we need kind of this army of volunteers to be able to help us because it's just us right now. And we're not able to get to reach everybody or do everything that we need to. So I think that's the way that we're going to head. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Soren?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Pro Tem and then Councilor Flores.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jamie. That was awesome. That's very impressive. Well done as usual. I know you do excellent work all the time. I mainly wanted just to simply say, send me that video.
Oh.
I want to use it. We need to get it on Snapchat for the youngsters and Instagram too. I don't know if can you do it on TikTok? Can you put it on TikTok? Put it there too.
She knows.
Somebody's got an account. I don't, but somebody has. I got an Instagram account. Maybe I can put it on there. Okay, that's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Jamie and Carla, for all your work. I mean, it's just fantastic. I remember when we first got elected, right, and just how do we engage the community? And it was just a whole series of, right, different things from creating this to having evening work sessions. And I know that I get a lot of compliments about your academy. I think people are like, I had no idea, right? I really had no idea. And it's had to evolve over some of the feedback that you've received, and then COVID hit. So I'm glad that you have all these various types of ways to engage the public, and especially our youth. That was going to be my question, and I'm so happy that the youth will be participating. I think there's many ways to do that, and I have a few, especially in that 18 to 24 category, been having conversations with New Mexico State University, and they definitely want to partner with us. They see that connection. So I'm thinking ASN MSU, and I have my social work intern student out in the audience. They have various associations and such, right? The ACES group through, it's the Department of Agricultural, and I'm not sure, but I just know it as the ACES department. I'm thinking at Cabron Park, there's always that group of youth or gentlemen that are playing basketball in the evening time. Would be a cool opportunity, right, to engage them, to say, that has always been that age group for me that feels disconnected, right? Like we have all these services for the little ones, some middle schoolers, right? But then as they get older, there's that age group that we just don't quite I think have a varied amount of activity, because not everybody plays sports, but I think we're getting there, and this would be one way, I think, to access folks like that. And then our soccer community, right? Soccer and the skateboard community. You know, they did an excellent job of organizing themselves for capital outlay funding. So I think they'd be really interested in providing those services. But I agree with everybody around that TikTok and Snapchat and those podcasts and the small videos, I think is where that age group likes to click on and hear everything, right, that they need to hear, and just trying to engage in that way. And I think you guys are awesome, and I really do. I've appreciated the work that you've put in. The digital newsletters, I think, are really important. I've gotten a lot of feedback on that, Jamie and Carla. Thank you for that. And anything else that I can help with, this has been, I know, a labor of love, and I've appreciated, from the council when I first started to presently, just working towards trying to engage our community in various ways. That's right. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have another question or comment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again, Jamie. The thought that occurred to me after I said thank you is we did that youth engagement committee work with the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico, and I think that that would be a good avenue. And it was a different. We did something different there. We actually had them come in and pretend. They actually did. Let's see. We had workshops where they discussed different issues. We had different department people in those workshops, and then they came up with solutions as to the issues we're facing, if I recall correctly. And it was a wonderful group of students. It was all day long, and they took over City Hall. Well, not really, but they didn't take over. But it was absolutely wonderful. My only concern about that was that. And I think that and working with the school district, with LCPS, we all agreed that we really wanted a different, it was almost like they were self-starters and leaders. We did have a few that were a little shy, but they sort of came around, but some didn't towards the end, didn't come around at all, even towards the end. So I thought that we could, I don't know if that's something that the League of Women Voters wants to do again. I don't know if that's something we could integrate with your program. But I was also thinking of collaborating with Las Cruces community schools, because those, yes, and Tessa and Mayor Pro Tem Gandara and I sit on that board, and there's various schools, and somehow integrating what we do here with what they do, and it'd be great if we could go into even the elementary, 1 through 6, and I think high school is great too, without a doubt. But I think middle school is kind of like being catcher in the rye. If you don't catch them then, you're never going to catch them. And we have to engage youth. And I think a program like this would engage, and it'd be a question of how it would be implemented. And maybe one of the community schools could be a site, I don't know. But I'm just thinking in terms of how to bring our youth in. If they could be in, yeah, it is a good idea, thank you. But I think LCCS, Dr. Hackes, Dr. Wendy Tomlinson, Dr. Lozano, I think would be amenable to sitting down, and the people we dealt with, last name Patterson, Jamie Patterson and Josie Miller. What do you think, Jamie? Well, think about it. Well, you have to, yeah. The two of you have to figure out how to add something else to do, right? But maybe we can expand personnel or something.
Mr. Mayor and Councilor Flores, if I may, when I mentioned that we were later in the spring, we're going to be talking to the Las Cruces Public School people. It's Jamie Patterson and Josie Miller that we'll be speaking to specifically, because that event happened late February of 2020, and it was so successful, and kids really enjoyed it. The adults really enjoyed it too, the presenters. And so it was a really great interaction and networking opportunity for everybody. And so that was definitely what spurred this on, that we could see how this was going to work, but we have to work out those logistics. I love the community schools idea. Again, it's capacity, right, and capacity building. And so once we can reach that point, then we're well on our way. But that's why Carla is so brilliant at her job, because she can reach the younger crowd, and she knows how to do that. And so that's the other thing that we're trying to strategize as well, to see what's going to work best. And so we've got all kinds of things underway. But I really appreciate your suggestions. They're very welcomed and very wonderful. Thank you.
And thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, and well, Jamie, you know what I think of this. I think it's great. Anytime we get the applicants, the graduates to go through this, they become little ambassadors to the city, and sometimes help answer questions from people that they talk to. So every time that it seems like that's maybe why the call volume is decreasing. So so try to hit 1,000 next time.
I will try
1,000 applicants.
I will try.
No, okay. So that pretty much concludes your presentation. We can't thank you enough for all that you do. And thank you, Carla, as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so the last item, 3.3, El Paseo South Solano Ad Hoc Committee Report. I know there's going to be some questions and some other things that are going to be generated. As I have in the past, because I have a business on South Solano building, I like to recuse myself, so I've already cleared that with Mayor Pro Tem. She's going to go ahead and take over for now, and she also has the agenda setting information. So
you just want to leave early.
With that, wish you guys well and have a good evening. Okay.
You're copying out, Mayor. You're copying out.
No, really. I'll be watching.
You don't have to say anything. You just sit there.
I'll be watching you guys from.
No, you can stay.
Thanks, Mayor.
We're asking you to stay.
Have a good evening.
Hi, Mr. Weir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Mayor Pro Tem and City Council, David Weir at the Community Development Department. I have a brief presentation to kind of summarize the activities of the ad hoc committee. And I believe there's one member in the audience, and the committee itself was chaired by Councilor Vasquez, so he may have some very astute commentary to make also. Well, just to start off the presentation, I want to summarize what the purpose was. The City Council adopted the ad hoc committee, and they basically started out with two directives of what they wanted them to look at. Basically, they wanted to look at a city-adopted policies related to corridor revitalization and the opportunities for transportation improvements. When the committee itself started to meet, they also chose to expand that to the adjacent neighborhoods and also to look at ways that they could increase the placemaking of those neighborhoods and make even more vibrant mixed-use corridors. And so the policy documents that they started as a base for their meetings were Elevate Las Cruces, the El Paseo Community Blueprint, and the Active Transportation Plan, and also the Infill Policy Plan. So those were a starting point for the committee. This is the membership. There were 16 members that participated on that. As I noted earlier, Councilor Vasquez was the chair. Councilor Abeta Stuvey assisted him with those items. And then when both of them needed assistance, Councilor Bencomo assisted. The rest of the membership was appointed by the council and the mayor. It was made up of community leaders, whether they be businessmen, community advocates, nonprofits, the schools, and also the university were all represented on that group. They met for approximately 9 meetings, basically December of 2020 until August of this year, and came up with recommendations. I'd also like to note that almost I think every department of the city contributed to the meetings of this ad hoc committee, and they provided that support with information and then also actually participating in some of the presentations. The committee itself came up with 2 strategic focuses. One was for neighborhoods and the other one was for the corridors themselves. And I'd like to take the time just to read those for you. In regards to the neighborhoods, the statement or vision they came up with, the Southern Infill neighborhoods envision and strive to be a place of economic stability, wealth creation, and healthy living. They are attractive, peaceful places where people feel welcome, safe, and comfortable, and are hotspots for dwelling choice, local shopping, eateries, entrepreneurship, and businesses. And then they also came up with a consensus on one for the corridors themselves. The Southern Infill corridors are seen as and continue to transform into thriving transit-oriented areas where businesses, residents, visitors in the city work together to create and maintain a place of sustainability, one that is pedestrian and bicycle friendly and addresses the needs of all cities. So through the course of their meetings, they kind of came up that as a common goal, what they'd like to achieve going forward, and the city assisting in those areas achieving these visions or strategic focus, as they called it. The committee itself came up with 9 recommendations, and what I'd like to do is go through the slides that go over them. But basically, they built these recommendations on reviewing, again, the vision of the plans that took place, the existing conditions of the properties, what type of tools were available to them, whether it be land use planning, zoning, financing, redevelopment tools. They also took input from the committee members themselves and what strategies other communities are using, and basically came up with basic themes. And so there were 9, and I said I'll go through them specifically. Just as a note, the meetings for this committee were all held by Zoom, so this picture was pilfered from Elevate Las Cruces, but I wanted you guys to have some you just didn't have words to look at in the presentation. The first recommendation the committee made was that there be a department designated for oversight of continuing activities, and basically that there would be designated staff to this, and that there would be budget for them to move forward with these projects. The second one was that within this area, and this slide shows the boundaries of the area that they studied throughout, that they have a program where they continue to evaluate the opportunities for either MRAs and the tools that are available to encourage redevelopment and revitalization of areas. And so the stars were some areas that you could actually look at. They included like the north end of El Paseo, the middle of El Paseo, Solano, some of the commercial areas that through that. And then also down towards the university area, that there may be some vacant properties that would be available. But the recommendation wasn't to just stay on those locations. It was where through continuous study and opportunities that there would be the opportunity to designate other MRAs and do the plans and studies necessary for that. The next recommendation dealt with fiscal resources. The committee wanted there to be budget so that there could be these MRA studies and plans developed, that there would be support for low-income tax credit projects. That's primarily the multifamily developments, that there would be financial commitment from the city to help with that there would be a commitment to develop technical assistance, that basically the expertise of the city could be placed in one area and then it would be available to property owners and residents of those areas, that they could come and get assistance to either maximize the use of their property, help them get started as a business, or just to organize to help neighborhood improvements and maintenance of their property. And basically, when a project did come along, that the city would seriously look at budgeting those activities. They also recommended that grant opportunities be pursued. One that's available is the U.S. HUD Choice Neighborhoods Initiative. That's something that, while the committee was wrapping up its recommendations, we couldn't hit the deadlines for this year, but it is something on the map for the next year. There are also U.S. EPA brownfields grants that are available to help with like any perceived environmental concerns, so it's an opportunity to do studies on properties. And then as any emerging opportunities, I don't know if some of the Build Back Better monies would be available for this, but it's something that should be investigated and pursued. And then as going forward, as these projects are identified, that they get included into the capital improvement program, and that since we do feel this is an area that needs some reinvestment in, that an emphasis or greater rating be put on projects within that area. There were actually 4 recommendations from this technical assistance, but I lumped them together in the presentation. They each have a different emphasis, but they really are geared towards the same thing, basically getting information out, helping the businesses and the citizens get the assistance, provide additional awareness of what the requirements the city has, and helping them get through, whether it be a building permit, it be a business registration, being put in touch with a financier, anything that could improve these neighborhoods and corridors. The first is a virtual redevelopment technical assistance program or portal. Basically, this is something that would be provided on the city's webpage. It would be totally dedicated to the southern infill areas and corridors. It would have a repository of all the information that the ad hoc committee had, their minutes, their discussion, their recommendations, all the support materials. It would have connections and also material to help them show what the workflows are to get a building permit, a business registration. It would have links to all the plans in that area and basically providing that technical assistance so they could be as successful as possible. The building technical assistance, and we use the term studio, was to help people when they want to upgrade a building or they want to go into a vacant building and they have to meet the building codes or there's a zoning situation. It would be a situation, or it would be the intent of this assistance would be able to provide them the direct assistance. Oftentimes, community development sees situations where people want to go into the building, but they know it has to be upgraded, and they don't have the finances to see what exactly they need to do. If there were some way, either through the MRAs and or LEDA, that we could actually pay an architect to come in and do a code analysis and say, these are the upgrades you need to make, these are the zoning variances you need, or these are various steps that you to utilize the infill process. But it would be very focused on those technical building and site development type of issues. The next one would be the business technical assistance, and I think this is something that the Economic Development Department's already working on. But again, it would provide that assistance on how to prepare a business plan, who you need to contact to get financing, what are some of the issues that you would encounter to start a business. And then the third was to address those neighborhoods that are in the area. How do you organize? How do you approach the city to get a street improved? How do you make sure that your park is in a good condition that you'd like? How do you establish a neighborhood watch? Those type of things, so that those assistances would be provided. And so I think a lot of those things, and through the discussion you had earlier today, a lot of those activities are provided through the city, but if you created these teams, you could use that expertise from the different departments to help address the needs of those neighborhoods and corridors. The next one is a project that actually is taking place. The Housing Authority wants to redevelop and increase the density of their properties on, I believe it's Colorado and Campo Wyatt. And so they're calling it the Paseos Verdes. Natalie Green with the Economic Development Department is also working with that group. They've already gone through a charrette on how to redevelop the property and have some ideas. So this shows some initial things, but the ad hoc committee wholeheartedly supported this activity and wanted to put their endorsement behind it. The last one was for the City Council to actually adopt a resolution designating this as a redevelopment area, stating this council's support and desire to have dedicated programs to this area, developing a program and staffing and budgeting appropriately. So those were the 9 activities. Just potential next steps. The first one on the presentation is what we're doing today. The next one would be from an organization standpoint, integrating these recommendations into the city's strategic plan, the capital improvement plans and budgets, then organizing to go forward with this programming and resourcing, and last of all, actually initiating those activities and going forward. So with that, I'm available to respond to any questions or discussion you'd like to have. I believe you all received a email from Sherry Thomas, your chair of your Planning and Zoning Commission. She thought other areas that you may want to hear today is that there was support from the committee to increase density of that area so that it would help support the corridors and vitality of it. She also endorsed the adoption of a resolution by City Council to create a program for that area, and also made suggestions on how that should be managed, and then also provided her information on grants that could help support this activity. So I wanted to make sure that was in the record also.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the presentation. Councilor Sorg, Councilor Flores.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me start out by saying, thanks to Orlando Pereira, we got a tour of downtown Detroit about, how many years ago is that? 4 or 5 years? Time flies. And I see some similarities. There is a business in downtown Detroit called Quicken Loans, in which they use a lot of younger employees, and those younger employees wanted housing near their work, downtown Detroit. So it just so happens that one of the buildings that was on the fire sale, excuse me, I'm in a fire sale downtown, was bought and remodeled, I could say, for housing. So I want to go to this, if you could go back to the slide where the affordable housing was planned on Campo Street. Is it possible, because we want to have mixed use housing, take part of that property and have some workforce housing there for people in the middle income or some maybe a little below, to house people that want to work downtown? And Electronic Caregiver has already indicated that they want housing for their workers there. Is that possible?
Madam Chair and Councilor Sorg, That is something that I believe is already being discussed. The Housing Authority has already had a charrette in which they were looking at ways that they could use their property that could include mixed use, various housing sizes. And then there's some other nonprofits that are looking at property across the street to redevelop that with not only housing but also supportive services. And I believe that with mixed income was the intent for those projects. So you have kind of a catalyst or demonstration project to actually show some of these ideas that were discussed by the ad hoc committee.
Yeah, okay, good. It sounds good. In case anybody didn't hear the word, is that electronic caregiver is going to employ a lot more new people very soon. Okay. They're looking to increase their workforce quite a bit. So this will be a good fit for that area. So I just wanted to point that out. We're going to be another Detroit. No, I'm kidding. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor Zorro. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, David, Mr. Weir. So as far as brownfields goes, there's a lot of money sitting there. A few years ago, you were probably there, Lisa LaRocque had a brownfields thing, and I think Mayor Pro Tem was there. You were there. Anyway, I was there, if I remember correctly. But at any rate, what I do remember being there, and I do remember the woman from the EPA, who I think is local, I mean, in New Mexico, saying there was beaucoup money there. There was just a lot of money there. And it was definitely a question of identifying a brownfield. So do you or does anyone in the city know whether there is a brownfield in the area? Or any maybe suspicion that there might be, and that we can look into it, and then the owner of that land would then, or wait a minute, would it have to be city-owned? Or no. It could be, yeah, it could be privately owned.
Madam Chair and Councilor Flores, the Community Development Department was recently at a conference where they talked about the brownfield EPA grants, and they basically said that they have a very liberal interpretation of that it's even if there's a suspicion of environmental problem, that they will fund those studies, the phase 1 or phase 2s of the property. And so it's something that oftentimes, in my experience, property owners are afraid of. They feel if something is identified, then they have to treat it immediately, which isn't necessarily the case. Basically, it provides history of what took place on those properties, what remediation measures are, and it also makes more funds available, if one is even found. But what I found interesting about the conversation was that there doesn't even have to be a known environmental problem. It just has to be one is suspected, and you want to find out what took place on the property, and there are funds available for that.
Even if it's suspected and not verified?
Correct.
Yeah, it was pretty liberal. It was like she was saying, and nobody's calling me. And so here we are, fast forward 3-4 years, and it's nobody's called her. So can you call her, please? No. Yeah. But seriously, yes, it'd be great if we could pursue that. And then as far as the infill, is there anything that the city can do in terms of some of the properties? Like, I think there was that one on Nevada that I think Councilor Vasquez had suggested it be the city buy it and it become like a park or recreation center for the community. And I don't know if that property is still there, but there's some properties that I believe are sitting vacant. And maybe we can look into seeing whether, why those properties are vacant. Are they abandoned? Are they empty? Are taxes being paid? Is the county going to put them up for sale? And maybe can we step in? I mean, how does that work? And can we do stuff like that? Because and then we have infill incentives too.
Madam Chair and Councilor Flores, that ties right into the recommendations for studying the MRAs. And so the first thing you have to do is make an assessment of those areas and create a plan. And then that opens another series of financing mechanisms the city can use to go forward with those properties. But the study is the first step.
Oh, the study's first step, and then the next step, and then the step after that, and the one after that, and then the one after that.
No,
Well-
it is dictated by state statutes, so you do the study, you have to make a designation of blight, which often neighborhoods don't like, but again, it's more of a perception and education, because it provides a lot more steps for you to go forward with it. In a sense, it's kind of the missing link that we've had with some of our land use plans. When you look at Amador Proximo, Apodaca Blueprint, even the El Paseo corridor, we do a good job of saying these are the issues, here's the gaps, here's the uses that we think would be successful here, but we don't plan for how we're going to finance that or bring those properties up. So if we create a program where we think about that before we even go into those planning efforts, there's a lot more chances of success. I would say that's probably what differentiated downtown and its development and some of these other plans. There was an idea that there had to be capital needs. You redid the utilities and the street networks, et cetera, but you thought about, as a city, how we were going to pay for those improvements at that time. So. Right.
And so, in terms of a timeline, do you have any idea? Is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Because the Apodaca Park plan is sitting there, right? Nothing's been done.
We do have a zone change for the property, so looks like
so that's happened.
Are some things taking place, but it's today really only prepared to make the recommendations of the ad hoc committee, so I don't have that timeline for you.
Oh, well, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Weir. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Councilor Vasquez.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, David. Thank you, Mr. Padilla, for being here as well, a member of the committee. Yeah, I think this takes us back to our discussion earlier about what kind of investments we can make in our neighborhoods as a city and a community to make places in our community safer. Now, I've gone on police ride-alongs right in these neighborhoods, both on Solano and El Paseo, and we've looked at different apartment complexes. We've looked at different, what they consider to be hotspots in different neighborhoods in the Belmont area, the Nevada area, the El Paseo area, and it's where you have some of the more, the higher cases of domestic violence and public intoxication, and of course, a lot of people experiencing homelessness. And so when we talk about reinvesting into our city and into our community in a way that's not just on the law enforcement side, but that's actually trying to address the root causes of some of these problems that our community faces. I think this is a perfect example of how we do that. And so I appreciate, Councilor Flores, your questions about what's next and how do we go from this ad hoc committee's report to the adoption of a resolution that will lay out the recommendations that will be accepted by the council that will then spur action by staff to actually get some of these MRA studies done and started so that we can achieve, so that we can leverage those funding resources that come with the MRA designation to look at specific parts, including some that were listed here, so that we can get the funding to be able to redevelop them. So, for me, I think that was the most important part of this exercise. Having done the Picturing El Paseo study over 10 years ago, I think now, and not having a whole lot to show for it except a really great study of what needed to be done, this is the next step in terms of getting the funding and getting the support of staff behind it, because it is going to have to be prioritizing capital investment and capital improvement programs for this area over the next 3 or 4 years. So there will have to be changes to the CIP. There will have to be some considerations for our budget and things like purchasing some of those vacant lots and vacant properties, right? Having actually an inventory of what exists there and where the city can create things like green space or community space or, facilitate the public-private partnerships of different business models or nonprofits. So I think this is really exciting, but I want to make sure that we do continue the progress moving forward. So that resolution, I think, will lay out the recommendations for council, and hopefully the next, this does touch, three city council districts, right, David?
That's correct.
So hopefully this is something that, Councilor Gandara and Abeta Stuvi and Councilor Bencomo, and then the next person who's here, Councilor Graham will all continue to champion it, right? Because that's going to be really exciting to actually see some of these projects come to fruition. And as you mentioned, Mr. Weir, the Paseo Verdes project is kind of like a pilot project that could really help kickstart as an anchor some of this development that I know our staff is very excited about, and Ms. Green is leading on as well. So those are my thoughts. Don't have any questions. I just want to thank you, David, for your hard work in kind of putting all these pieces together. You know, we talk as a community about bringing a committee together of people that are representative of a district or an area, and having folks on from the university, having folks on from the development committee, having small business owners, of course having city councilors, but also area residents, and even former Superintendent Karen Trujillo, having all these folks being part of these solutions and asking questions and talking about what's possible here. To me, this is just a great way to validate all the work that's gone into from these different community members and put some real dollars and use our policy muscle, because when we do this here, I think we can do this anywhere else in the city. We just have to have the willpower and the ability to follow through with the recommendations of the committee. So with that, thank you, David. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilor Vasquez. Go ahead, Councilor Bencomo.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you so much, David, for the presentation and for all the staff that were involved in this process, and for my fellow councilors. Yeah, I totally agree with Councilor Vasquez on, honestly, the urgency behind this, but also just the trail that this is laying for other blighted areas in the community. I feel like Mayor would get mad at me, but he's not here, so I'm going to talk about it. I've already talked to staff about the importance of this committee, this model, and how we recreate it for areas like West Picacho that are also incredibly blighted, that deserve attention and investment, especially in resources, and getting a set of stakeholders involved from the business community, from the schools, from a variety of different areas. And so I feel like the earlier and the sooner that we implement this and that we do this right, I think the better this model will be. And so I'm excited to see what it comes forth. David, I'm curious if you have already had conversations in-house at community development about who will be the staff that is assigned to this, or if you need direction on anything today.
Madam Chair and Councilor Bencomo, staff has had a lot of discussions because, as you said, this type of approach could be replicated. There's several city properties that may have that going forward, but I think the biggest thing tonight, this afternoon, from the council is just an endorsement that you felt this was a positive process and one to move forward and to support your actions as you go into the budget year and other activities that impact your districts. So,
thank you, David. And any thought on the person that would lead this?
I think that's a little above my pay grade today. So.
Okay. That's right. Well, I can definitely, Councilor Vasquez, maybe that's something we can follow up with IFO on, just making sure that, I think Sharon Thomas, member of the committee, made an excellent point about Andy Hume and his prior role and how successful that was. So I think that it's important that we start thinking about that, and that we don't overwork anybody, but that if there's someone that will have who will be invested in this project. So I just wanted to reiterate that, and of course thank Orlando for being here today, and DC Danes joined us for meetings, and Natalie Verde also joined us for meetings, and a bunch of other folks. So I just wanted to thank you, David.
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilor Bencomo, there were several nonprofits that also presented to you, and also neighborhood leaders, and I didn't want to leave them out, but I think I did in my presentations. You had La Esperanza come and talk about their organizing history, and like I said, Mesilla Valley, Community of Hope, and FYI both made presentations and also started to follow the rest of your meeting. So I think the committee should be very proud of the collaborative approach they took and the input they got from everybody. And all of city staff was incredibly supportive. Anytime a request was made to present or make information, they always made themselves available and shared.
Thank you, Councilor Bencomo. Thank you, David. I do have a couple of questions and comments. David, first of all, I'm very supportive of a resolution bringing this forward to study this in terms of whether this is a good MRA designation. And I think we all feel that it is. It's very blighted. I think all of us on this council get a tremendous amount of calls and issues related to this. And it's difficult to redevelop when we're seeing the kind of crime that we see there. The urban dwellers, if you will, that are there, and just a number of things. So is there anything that prevents us from recommending that that not only do we study it, but do we ensure that it's in the budget discussions and that we put it on the capital outlay, and that we start identifying FTEs, within this budget cycle? I feel like we can do some of this simultaneously, and that would be my recommendation. David?
Madam Chair and councilors, I think that's really the kicking off point from this meeting, is starting to flesh out how a program would be formulated and what we are talking from a fiscal standpoint and budgetary wise, and how to, it seems to be a really good time since the city's already starting to look at budget and those discussions.
Right, that would be my recommendation, to do all of this simultaneously and ensure that this gets on our capital outlay list, if you will, and have very serious talks about what that would look like in the form of again, the budget, FTEs, and funding moving forward. The other thing is that I think there are numerous businesses that really would like to see this. There's a lot of folks that are not quite informed in that area, especially about Med Park, Wyatt, who have been hit in the last month or so pretty hard, and some serious, not only property crime, but major theft in their business. So I just feel like we need to have a robust campaign that we're looking at this. We're concerned. We understand what this is basically doing to your business. And this is our plan moving forward. And then Councilor Vasquez made mention of this inventory. I think that's an excellent idea, but I think we have an inventory, and shouldn't we have that through our neighborhood action team, an inventory of all the vacant properties that are available there, and who owns them, and how are they keeping them up, and codes, that whole vibrant sort of programming that we developed several years ago. And that would continue to be my recommendation, that we involve, that letters go out to each of those vacant, the owners of those vacant properties, saying what we're wanting to do, and that it's important that you keep up the area and the building, and that because this is happening. It's like the chicken and egg, right? Nobody's going to want to come over there and invest in that in that area if we're seeing the kind of crime that we're seeing there. So I think I love the ideas that earlier Chief spoke to, all the programming and resources that are being infused in that area as it relates to Lcpd. But I also feel that community development, some of our PIOs can go out really expressing what we're trying to do, and it's going to take all of us together, right, to manage and maintain this, to try to reduce the crime and such that we're seeing there. Let's see. I think that's it. I appreciate the conversation. Great work. Thank you, Councilor Vasquez, Councilor Bencomo, Councilor Stuvey, Mr. Padilla. I see you out there. You're a bit blurry. I'm not wearing my glasses, but I see you out there. I thank you, and for all the folks that sat and took time. I think that it was really important, and I agree. A definite it's just an option and something we should scale out, right, in these other blighted areas. It's a nice, I think, model to move on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, me, thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Counselor, yeah, thank you. David, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Did you get the direction you think you
I
needed?
did.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
All right, I think that concludes, right, Bifo, all our items. And so I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved by Flores.
I'll second it, so.
Motion made by Councilor Flores, second by Councilor Sorg. Christine?
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Councilor Abeyta-Stuvey is absent. Councilor Vasquez?
Yes.
Councilor Bencomo?
Also, yes.
Councilor Sorg?
Yes.
Councilor Flores?
Also, yes.
Councilor Gondara?
Yes.
And Mayor is absent.